Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The station was crowded. Many people with colorful suitcases in their hands and travel pillows around their necks stood patiently on the platforms, waiting for the train to arrive. Some crowded at the stalls, choosing a cake or a crossword puzzle for the evening. Some child begging his mother for ice cream. In all that bustle, very few paid attention to the young girl. In a panic, they rushed around the platform. For the umpteenth time, she ran up and down the platform, peering under every bench and behind every kiosk. Ethan shouted Maria in utter despair. "We have to go, Ethan. Come out, please." The girl slowly slid down the wall of the train station and covered her face with her hands. She stepped away for a minute to buy water, to leave her little brother alone, and then he was long gone. It seems that she has looked everywhere, wherever possible, and now could only make a terrible guess. Where could a 6-year-old boy disappear to on a busy platform? Yes, anything could have happened to him. Against her will, the girl's imagination conjured up horrible pictures of Ethan being grabbed and carried away by strange men. How he climbed under the train or went into someone else's carriage. And on top of all that, the boarding of their train was scheduled to begin within minutes, and Maria's eyes were already blurring. When she remotely heard the familiar voice of a child, Maria jumped up, began to look around, and suddenly, in a miracle, she saw a woman leading by the hand and an invisible smiling Ethan. The woman slowly stepped toward her and appeared to be explaining something to the boy, pointing her finger at Maria. She rushed toward them and held her brother tightly to her, kissing his blonde curly top. "Thank you very much. I had already imagined so much for myself." The girl turned to the stranger. Once she had recovered a little. "You see, he ran away, and I've been looking all over for him." "Yes, I understand." The woman interrupted her in a low, velvet voice. "Children of this age are quick-witted and curious. You have to keep an eye on them. Otherwise, they will do such a thing. And you, Ethan, don't run away from your mother again." She turned to the boy. "This is my brother." Maria gently corrected the stranger. She was not, however, accustomed to nagging at words. Only now the girl paid attention to the strange appearance. The woman had dark skin, a long brightly colored dress, a headscarf, and a whole assortment of jewelry around her wrists and fingers. A pure gypsy. "How did you know his name was Ethan?" Maria suddenly asked. "Ethan told me all about it." The stranger smiled with a sparkling gold tooth. "He is a very sociable boy." "Oh, really? It's usually hard to get him to talk to strangers too." "Where did you see him?" "Ethan ran up to me and looked at the rings for a long time," the woman explained. "He was just playing with them until I suspected he might be wanted. I hope he hasn't lost anything." Maria lit up and went through her purse. "Is there any way I can thank you for bringing him to me?" The gypsy waved her hand nonchalantly. "What are you, my dear? I have not done anything for you. Here you are." Maria handed the gypsy a $10 bill. Ignoring the woman's words without objection, she took the money thoughtfully, rolled it up, and shoved it into her dress pocket then, so that everything would be fair. "Let me give you out of the pen. Everything, I'll tell you." "I'm not confused about anything." Maria waved her head confusedly. "I'm sorry, but we'll be on our way. Our boarding will begin very soon. And I don't really believe in fortune-telling." The girl turned to Ethan and tried to catch him in her arms, but someone squeezed her wrist tightly. The gypsy woman was looking through cloudy, dark green eyes and seemed to be looking right into her soul. She mumbled something quietly, fumbled Maria's palm and went over, and with her free hand amber beads around her neck. For a moment, Maria even felt uncomfortable. "You love your brother Ethan very much, but I see there is another Ethan in your life. Your chosen one." The gypsy's tone built softly and ingratiatingly, slowly enveloping the mind. "Are you both preparing for something important and worrying about it? Am I saying that right? Did Ethan tell you that too?" Maria said cautiously, squinted at her little brother. "I see your husband's identity has been rather blurred so far. He looks like a good, decent man." The woman continued nonchalantly. "But there is something wrong. There is too much darkness gathering around him. There's a mystery about him, and he doesn't want anyone to know. I don't think it's a good thing." I can see that. There's a little bit of a rift between the two of you at the moment. But if you don't do something about it, it's going to grow into an abyss. A lot of tears will be shed. The Gypsy woman is shaking the beads in her hands faster and faster, so that they would probably soon be torn at all, if Maria, at last, did not come to her senses and did not free her handwords. The women did not frighten the girl at all. On the contrary, they rather made her laugh. Maria was once more convinced that fortune-telling was an utter deception, sometimes with occasional hits. She knew her husband too well, a loving, honest, and hard-working man, to believe a single word from this mysterious stranger. Her Ethan was the most wonderful man on earth, and no one in the world Maria loved as much as she loved him. There was no rift, much less a chasm between them, and there could never have been. Ethan was always there, as he was now, as the two of them were actively engaged in the preparations for the bright and memorable event. Their first wedding anniversary. Exactly 1 year ago, Maria said yes in the registry office, and to this day, she believed that building a family with Ethan was the best decision of her life. There was always happiness, understanding, and comfort in their home. The loudspeaker was already announcing the arrival of the train on the platform. "You are being very clever, Auntie," the girl said quickly. "We really must run. The train is here. Thank you for your help. Goodbye." But the Gypsy woman still had no intention of backing down. "Doesn't make a mistake, Maria," she exclaimed. "My divination has helped me to see. Many people of my sleepless night will tell the truth about you, and your destiny will tell the most important things." She reminded Maria and Ethan, who were walking away at a brisk pace, and put a piece of paper in her hand. "There is no need to tempt fate," Gypsy said. "Contact me. As soon as you come, I can tell you more and help you if possible. Just don't forget, Maria." Maria only absent-mindedly nodded, throwing the scrap into her bag, and began to look with her eyes for the right carriage. She did not listen at all to what the Gypsy was saying. Right now, her thoughts were occupied with something else entirely. Ob settled down in the compartment and fed the figure. Maria took out her smartphone and texted her husband. "We're off. Meet me tomorrow at the train station at 7:40 p.m. Following the message immediately flew 3 smiley hearts. The answer from Ethan came almost immediately. "Agreed. By the way, how was the casting?" he asked. "Great. The director said I have every chance to get the role." Quickly typed Maria. "And I'm sure you'll get it. At last you're coming. I've missed you terribly. I hope you get good roommates in the compartment." She clutched the phone to her chest and sighed happily, catching herself smiling, an idiotic look on her face. What an Ethan. Caring, sweet, perfect. How could the Gypsy have said anything about him? "Are you texting Ethan?" Ethan Jr. asked. "Yes, with Ethan." Maria nodded. The younger brother always knew her when she corresponded with her husband, probably by the goofy smile that appeared on her face every time. "Ethan is coming to meet us when we get there," La cheered the boy and clapped his hands. "Ethan, do I have a surprise for you?" Suddenly the girl said, "You'll have a kinder. Specially for you, bought with the Blue Patrol." She handed her brother a chocolate egg and watched in amusement as he carefully removes the wrapper. "I wish there was a racing driver," Ethan wished aloud. "I thought about the egg in 2 parts and held out one of them to Maria." Maria had a calm, joyful heart beating rapidly in her chest in anticipation of something big and momentous. She was returning to Phoenix, to the city where she had been born and raised. She had graduated high school, made true friends, met love. Almost her entire life was tied to the city. Maria traveled a lot, and she loved it. But she knew that after all that fuss, she could always return home, where everything is native, where they wait, where they love, where they are always happy. The girl also studied at the University of Arizona as an architect, and by now she had already completed 3 courses. She successfully developed in other areas as well. She often worked part-time for her parents, who had their own travel business. Maria always strived for perfection, and by her 21st year, she had achieved almost everything. She had perfect friends, a perfect husband, perfect composure, looks, and even posture. Her only plan was to get a prestigious job after graduation. But even with that, things were going very well. Maria had a dream of becoming an actress since childhood. But it was probably the only dream that never came true, turning into something foreign, distant, and unrealizable. Maria thought that she was not talented enough for that, so she did not even try to enroll in drama school after graduation. However, as it turned out, all was not yet lost, because the situation developed in a very unexpected way. Last year, she was noticed on social media by a photographer from a modeling agency who asked her to take some of her photos for a city magazine. Maria agreed. Then somehow this magazine ended up in the hands of the director of a big new project, and in Maria, he saw the main character of his movie. And then 2 months ago, she received a letter by mail from him urging her to come to the casting in Seattle. Maria was taken aback by such an offer. She was still not sure of herself as an actress, but she decided if fate gives her such a chance, she should take it. The audition took place only now in June. Maria told her parents she was going to Seattle for a week to see a friend. She lied because she didn't want to upset anyone, which was why she'd been given Ethan along for the ride. We just had to go there with him. Ethan is the best speech therapist in Seattle, and we had to see him. My mother got excited. As soon as the daughter informed him of her intention, the child is 7 years old, and he still can't pronounce the letter R. Mom was very worried about this. She had already taken Ethan to all the speech therapists in Phoenix, but none of them could get her son's tongue. Maria didn't see anything wrong with that. She thought that the time would come and her brother would be able to pronounce the unfortunate letter on his own. But I got a small one. I've had enough of drinking them already, and Ethan scrambled to get the toy out of my hand. Of course, in a foreign city, a 6-year-old child had no one to put him with, so I had to carry him everywhere with me. However, at the audition itself, Ethan won the hearts of many actors and the admissions committee. Maria did not even think that if she really get the role, it will be on the bluff just because she has such a cute little brother. But still, in all seriousness, she was really worried. Here it was, her childhood dream could either come true or finally come true. But now everything that could depend on her, the girl had already done. Now all that was left was to wait for the verdict. So she gave up the idea of casting, and sweet dreams of filming Maria switched to another no less, and maybe even more important subject of the anniversary of the wedding with Ethan. It was exactly 2 weeks away, and preparations were in full swing. Maria and Ethan were going to have an unforgettable celebration, and since the spring they had been sitting down in the evenings and planning how they would celebrate this important date. They both wanted to recreate something special, something that symbolized their family, their wedding. They responded on the same principle. So after a raucous feast in a restaurant with friends and relatives, the two of them hiked far into the mountains and spent the night in a beautiful mountain cottage. This time the couple also planned to get out into nature, to take food and desserts with them, and to call a photographer of their closest relatives and friends. And yet Maria seemed to be still missing some kind of zest, and she tried hard to find it. The sun was already rolling in from the horizon. Bright, evening rays illuminated the compartment. To our joy, no one had ever joined them. So he and Ethan quietly rode together. The boy played with his tablet for a while and quickly fell asleep. Then, out of the arc of a busy day, Maria leaned her head against the wall and watched the scenery, floating by outside the window. The girl didn't notice how she eventually fell asleep, too. A hoarse, extended horn sounded. The train slowed down and soon stopped at a large, beautiful platform. Maria woke and fed Ethan beforehand. She put him in a children's backpack, collected all his toys, and counted the rest of his belongings. By the time they arrived, she and her brother were ready in the vestibule. The conductor, terribly thin and frail, easily pulled open the heavy door and removed the apron. And after divesting herself of the suitcase, Maria set it out on the pavement. Ethan jumped down the top step on his own. Goodbye, he waved to the conductor and headed confidently toward the entrance to the building. Ethan, wait. Thanking the woman, Maria ran after her brother, at the same time looking around for her husband. The train only stopped for 5 minutes. All the people getting off here quickly left their carriages and the conductors put out. Yellow flags rolled up, waiting for the train to move. Soon the wagons were moving faster and faster as their numbers flashed. Surprisingly, not many people got off at Phoenix, and there were far fewer people on the platform than there had been in Seattle yesterday. Nowhere among them, however, could Maria discern a familiar face. She had already caught her brother and was leading him by the hand, holding her bag on her shoulder and rolling her suitcase behind her. So she had to walk to the nearest bench to get her phone and make the call. Ethan didn't pick up the phone. She dialed him a few more times, but the situation didn't change. And after a lot of ringing, a nasty one was heard. The caller's phone isn't answering. Leave a message after the tone. Maybe Ethan got the time wrong. It's unlikely they discussed everything yesterday, just overslept. He's stuck in traffic. But then why isn't he answering? Could something have happened? Maria didn't want to show her confusion to her brother, so without thinking twice, she decided to call a cab. Suddenly, someone put their hands over her eyes. Guess who? Whispered in Ethan's ear. Relieved, Maria exhaled, feeling the familiar native scent of men's perfume. She turned around and put her arms around her husband's neck. He laughed, and picking up her easily, he spun her around on the spot. Nearby joyfully jumped up and down Junior. Why did not you pick up the phone? Offended? Asked Maria as soon as she was lowered to the ground. I left my phone. You must have called while I was running to you, Ethan. What's the matter with leaving the phone? I thought something had happened to you. Is it so hard to take it with you? I had my hands full this time, and my other jeans had pockets sewn into them. The man parried, still smiling. Maria squinted. And what else haven't you noticed? Come back. On the bench lay a giant bouquet of red roses, made up in the middle of the card. The future movie star answered his admirer. Ethan Jr. spelled it out. Maria absolutely did not expect this. Slowly shifted her gaze satisfied husband on the bouquet, neatly tied with a blue ribbon. After a couple of seconds, she took the flowers in her hands and kissed her husband fervently. How many of them are there, dumbfounded? Whispered the girl, looking at the bouquet. 101 roses. I will love you exactly until the last of these roses withers, proclaimed Ethan. He seemed to be expecting an answer. But apparently instead, the task on his wife's face continued. There are 100 alive, one artificial one. Maria once again felt the happiest in the world. She walked proudly toward the car, barely peeking out from behind the bouquet, while passing ladies were looking at her enviously. Ethan was a romantic, and sometimes she thought that their relationship was still like a ninth-grade teenage relationship. She liked it, though, because it never seemed to cool their feelings for each other. Nevertheless, though Ethan was a simple and kind character, at the right moment he became very serious and responsible. So he could always be relied upon. And for me, the bail was demandingly asked by my brother when everyone got into the car. Do you want flowers too? Ethan asked incredulously, seating the boy in the back seat. The boy shrugged his shoulders thoughtfully. But to be honest, I haven't made up my mind yet. I'd rather buy you a puppy tomorrow than go on patrol. Ethan's eyes lit up more than the patrol. Come on, the boy nodded. Just pick some cold egg. So it's a chaser, not a Mal. I've got 4 now, but I can't vouch for the racer. The man put his hands up. At this rate, his teeth will deteriorate. Maria said sternly, sitting in the front, as Ethan plopped down in the driver's seat. Oh, it's only milk. Let the child enjoy his childhood. He responded nonchalantly. So what's the plan? First, we drop Ethan off at his parents' house. He glanced at the boy through the rearview mirror. We don't have a baby seat. So, comrade, if we see one, we bend it right away. I got it. I got it. Ethan said eagerly. Maria's parents lived in an ordinary apartment in the neighborhood. On the way, she immediately texted her mother and warned her that her guests would be arriving soon. It took a good half an hour to get home, and it wasn't boring, by the way. Ethan turned on the radio, and the interior of the car was filled with the sounds, not too profound, but fun songs. Little Ethan enthusiastically sang along, not really paying much attention to what the lyrics were about. And the lyrics talked, among other things, about a lover and cheating, and many other things that children his age did not need to know. He liked the light, cheerful melodies of the songs, but did not go into the words. Maria herself, too, rarely listened to the deep messages of the music. When Ethan arrived, he grabbed his backpack and was the first to run up to the entrance and ring the intercom. When everyone took the elevator up to the 6th floor, there was already standing at the door Helen in an apron with a towel on her shoulder from the apartment, pulling a delicate doughy aroma of something sweet. And Maria, not without pleasure, recognized the smell of my mother's buns. "Let's not hurry to run these faster," I urged my mother, driving the delegation inside. "I have buns under there, I guess. You develop here for now and come to the kitchen, and I'll go get it." Actually, we were going to stay long, just to get Ethan started. Confusedly, Ethan muttered to the elder. But Maria tugged him affectionately by the arm, leading him deeper into the apartment. From what? But the girl had never turned down her mother's pastries before. The kitchen was bright and comfortable. Soft morning light poured in through the see-through curtains. But without both of them alive, the children's pictures of Maria and Ethan hung above the table, and among them was a picture of her father fishing with a huge clod in his hands. "By the way, isn't Dad home?" Maria asked, looking at the picture. "I sent him to the store. He ate everything yesterday. Now there is nothing to cook for lunch." Mom replied, "Don't you worry. He'll be here soon." Helen was already rummaging in the oven, taking out a huge tray. Maria quickly flew over and helped her, then buttered all the buns and put them on a plate, leaving my mother to do nothing. "What did the speech therapist say?" The first thing Helen asked, untied the apron. "Said the situation is hopelessly naive," sighed Maria doomfully. How straight hopelessly, all so bad. Panicked the woman. In all this fuss with money, Maria never took her brother to the doctor. She had no time for that. But still, she did not dare to admit it. "No, Mama, calm down. The doctor said that everything will come with time, and there is no need to make a big deal out of it. That's what he said. Where's the certificate? Why does he need to write a certificate if everything is fine?" The girl threw up her hands, but of course he spoke in slightly different words. "But all in all, I gave you the basic gist for plausibility," she added. "He sounded strange. You must have seen that speech therapist." Helen mumbled incredulously. "Yes, Mommy did." So Ethan went for nothing. What did you do there?" The woman continued her questioning. Maria stretched out a lot of things, getting ready to improvise. But luckily, her brother flew into the kitchen, who would have done it 100 times better. Ethan was always a fan of embellishing all stories, so Mom would hardly suspect where they really were. Luckily, his brother didn't let him down, and while everyone was having tea and scones, Ethan Sr. described the trip to his mother in great detail, trying to hide a smile. Watched from the sidelines how rapidly his mother-in-law's face changes, at once displays all her inner monologues. That's the way the trip turned out. In the end, it flew by, only I did not understand with which particular friend went to see Maria. From what I heard, there was a feeling that there were a few or even a lot of them. Mom, it was Kelly. Remember I told you. She went to Italy to study after high school. So now, on vacation, she decided to fly back to her hometown. Her parents live in Seattle now. Maria was not confused, remembering an old friend. Kelly. Apparently Helen was surprised by that answer. Of course I remember. Except that I think I saw her in a store the other day. I was so surprised, I thought, what is she doing in our area? Well, I guess she's close. I still did not come close. But the girl was very much like our Kelly. Maria and Ethan looked at each other perplexed. Was Kelly really here? They hadn't seen each other in almost 3 years, and the girl would have been very happy to see her. In their senior year of high school, Kelly and Maria had become very close, practically best friends. It was with her that Maria had the funniest high school memories of running away from class together, stealing food from the cafeteria, putting on Teacher's Day skits. Once they even quarreled and fought for the attention of the lead singer of the school band, who, by the way, was almost 2 years younger than both of them. Sometimes Maria remembered those moments with a warm smile on her face, and every time she caught herself thinking how great it would be to meet Kelly, chat, laugh, like in the good old days. Maria quietly reached under the table for her phone. She flipped through almost the very end of the list and finally found a contact for Spike. It was a nickname Kelly had earned after another escape from gym class, when she had fallen straight into a patch of grass, to get her head all tangled up in the thorns. Maria, then, looking at her friend, laughed. However, the next day she came in with a short haircut, almost all her hair, and looking like a little thorn herself. After thinking for a few more moments and looking at the girl's avatar, Maria typed, "Hi, Thorny. It's been a long time. Aren't you in the USA right now by any chance?" How long did Maria remember Kelly? She had always said that she was going to study abroad after school, so she spent hardly any time on subjects other than English and German. But the irony was that after getting her exam results and applying to universities, Kelly dumbfounded everyone by announcing that she would be flying to Italy to study with zero knowledge of the language. At that time, all her friends and acquaintances thought she was crazy. But by this time, Kelly was a true polyglot, and Maria openly admired her friend's achievements. Maria was distracted by the creaking of the door in the hallway and by someone's footsteps. Her father came in from the store. Mama and Papa jumped up from the table. Ethan ran in and rushed into the hallway. The massive, broad-shouldered Robert picked up his son easily in his arms and put him on his neck while he laughed. "What men?" He muttered in a clear, low voice at the sight of his daughter and son-in-law in the corridor. "I thought you were arriving in the evening. I could at least buy some beer. We've had it in the fridge for 2 months now." Helen shook her hands. "Do you want me to pour it right now? Why buy a new one? Helen, it's not your beer. It's just a name." Robert dismissed it dismissively. "It's Ethan's anniversary too. Soon I'll give them a proper beer." And now the mother, pouring what she has. Robert lowered his son to the floor and twirled his long mustache around his finger, hiding a sly smirk behind it. No, Ethan's driving. And I don't drink on principle." Maria protested. "And I do drink. I'll have a beer." Ethan shouted loudly. Robert immediately laughed and patted his son on the cheek. That's where the real man grows up. He had mischievous lights in his eyes, just like Maria's when she was particularly cheerful. People always said that Maria took after her mother in everything. She had exactly the same build, long blonde hair, and a neat nose. But Maria's eyes were definitely Papa's amber radiant. Blonde. While her mother was explaining to her that alcohol was not allowed to small children, Robert poked his daughter's pike and shook his son-in-law's hand firmly, so that he almost dislocated his shoulder. Importantly, as he made his way into the kitchen, he deftly grasped a bun with 2 fingers and noisily inhaled its aroma. But how are the rolls today? He turned to an indistinct person. "Yes, as usual," his mother responded, pouring a glass over the milk. Robert shoved a whole bun into his mouth in one fell swoop, and almost without chewing. Swallowed it. "Oh, mother, not divine," he mumbled. I said the usual embarrassed mother. Maria always had a lot of fun watching her parents. They were considered very respectable people in society. Everyone knew them as owners of a successful tourist business. But at home, this mustachioed big man flying around in his cheeks buns and a fragile girl, like a bird flitting around him, did not look too much like business partners. "What are you, stomping in the aisle?" Robert asked menacingly, shifting his bushy eyebrows. "Come to the table." "We've already eaten," Ethan interjected gently. "Well then, you'll just have a chat with your father. I have to leave for work soon. I'll be there tonight." My parents had their own camping place in the country with a small travel goods store. In addition, they were engaged in organizing tours, making interesting routes, equipped places for safe camping, created off-road vehicles for hiking and campers, or drove them themselves actively, and summer vacations were always in demand in Phoenix. With the advent of the vacations, people woke up, got out of their cramped apartments, and bundled up. They went to town. Work was getting very busy, and rooms at the campground were booked a month in advance. So my parents spent all their time at work and on weekdays on the weekends. They even had to send Ethan to kindergarten for the summer shift. "Tell me soon, how will you celebrate the anniversary?" Robert asked, chewing hard on a bun. "And I'm asking many times, they have not decided yet. Have not decided." So while you decide already, and the anniversary will pass. If you have such problems with imagination, then you can put on me to organize the holiday. Robert, you first deal with your own affairs. Helen sternly pronounced Helen not to pester the boys. I'm sure they're in the middle of their training. The woman looked lovingly at her daughter and stroked her hair. If they need help, they will come to us. And you yourself have prepared a gift for them. She looked at her husband again, inquiringly. I've already said I'll give them beer, he laughed. Robert, apparently, found his phrase very funny. Maria and Ethan looked at each other silently. Just kidding, why are you so gloomy? Are you sitting? Robert was surprised. So how is it going? Yes, there are only organizational matters. Ethan smiled. In any case, there is still time, Maria added. We have exactly 14 days before the feast. We will let you know soon. Let's do it now, you can't believe it. It's been a year already. Can you imagine? My father turned to my mother and continued his tirade without waiting for an answer. It seems like just yesterday that Maria was being prepared. This white dress was dressed up, and it has been a year already. I saw her in her wedding dress. I still have the picture on my bedside table, and Maria wanted to delete it. Every morning my mother and I wake up every day and admire it. What kind of daughter have we raised? Maria's memory immediately flashed back to the photo her father had taken before her wedding, of her sitting on the bed among the scattered clothes and makeup. Still completely shot, not wearing makeup, but she's in her dress. Robert had been watching her and had discreetly photographed her through the doorway. Maria then asked her father to delete or at least reshoot the picture, but he fell in love with exactly that one. So then he even printed it out and framed it. Dad said that Maria in the picture was very beautiful and relaxed. But the girl herself thought the picture was funny and ridiculous. You, Ethan, look, don't hurt Maria, so that at the holidays she will be as happy blooming as she was last year. Father slowly drank milk from his mug, wiped his mustache with his hand, and suddenly he was completely moved. How quickly time flies. First Maria, then before you know it, Ethan will bring his bride. And then the grandchildren. Helen, pour me some more milk. Helen laughed nervously, so that even the milk spilled a little while she poured it. Here's a grandmother to write me down for sure not yet. We still have our own son to raise. Don't wait too long with the kids. But also do not hurry, softly spoke. She had her last daughter and son-in-law. You have time to live for yourself too. It is necessary to travel a career, to build experience, to gain. To be able to raise their children in the future. Yes, we never thought about children, while Maria timidly put it in, but no one heard her. Helen turned to her husband again. Will our Ethan be bringing his bride soon? Don't go overboard here either. He's got other things on his mind, thank God. Yeah, like getting the racer in the movie world too. Ethan Sr. grinned. Time flew by while they were talking. Maria loved such gatherings, when the whole family gathered around the big table by the stove buns and listening to Robert's tales. On any mundane topics, everyone came to their senses only when the father realized he was almost late for work. Then the couple got ready to go to their place after all. As soon as the door behind Maria and Ethan slammed shut, they both fled at once. Visiting your parents. It's not a good idea. My tongue is going to fall off and black buns are coming out of my stomach. Ethan exhaled. He patted his stomach and didn't say a word. Maria didn't feel any better. I think the dead man's dad is talking seriously, she muttered. And then added, I love my parents. I wouldn't trade them for anyone else. The couple decided to walk back down the stairs while they talked about their lives. They got into a bright red Nissan, where Maria was still waiting for her huge bouquet, and calmly drove home. However, as it turned out later, only Ethan was calm. The worm of doubt stirred in the girl's heart again. Look, we don't really have anything ready, she said thoughtfully. What's there to get ready for? Immediately realized what Ethan's wife meant. We'll take a boat out on the lake, have a picture session on the deck, go swimming, and then we'll all sit together in the gazebo on the shore in the evening. I checked the weather all month should be hot. I could see that Maria was thinking about something, but Ethan couldn't figure out what was wrong. and she herself was vaguely aware of exactly what was bothering her. It seemed a little different from what she was expecting. The whole time was even absurd. Taking so long to contemplate the holiday, going through so many ideas to end up settling on the gazebo. She wanted to add something unusual to the program, the cherry on the cake, so to speak. But alas, she had no suitable ideas. "Why are you confused about something?" Ethan asked affectionately. "Turn off the soft music playing in the background." Maria did not immediately react to her husband's words. Only after a few seconds she looked into his eyes and her face showed something vaguely resembling a smile. The girl did not think it necessary to hide her thoughts from Ethan, so she wanted to share them. But she decided that now, while he was driving, was not the best time to do so. So the conversation moved on to the evening. In the meantime, the girl only said, "No, Ethan, it's okay. And we told my parents that we were going to go to the country. I got the impression that Mom and Dad were still expecting us to have a noisy banquet." Ethan grinned kindly. "Maybe. But personally, I don't like that kind of thing." The girl was sitting in a Copa chair, not suspended from the ceiling, but behind a glass balcony. The balcony was Maria's favorite place. Nothing gave her as much pleasure as climbing into the cocoon in the evening and watching from above through the panoramic windows as life swarmed down there and colorful people. There were a lot of little ants rushing around. He and Ethan lived in a 14th-floor apartment on the 12th floor, with a view of almost their entire neighborhood. Maybe even jokingly called their balcony a spy hideout. After all, anyone could really be tracked from it. Besides, from the 12th floor, it was always great to admire the chic entrances and shut-ins. In a word, sheer pleasure. This time, Maria decided to go into seclusion to chat with Kelly, who didn't answer until late afternoon. Her friend was very excited about Maria's message and said she was going to write to her herself and suggest a walk because she had really arrived. As it turned out, Kelly had already done all her planned business in USA and was completely free for the remaining half of the trip. What could not be said about Maria? Reasoned sensibly, however, she decided that she could spare a couple of days to go out. After all, not all the time to sit at home, especially when it's the height of summer. Needless to say, the girls immediately began planning a meeting. "We go to the mall, go scooting along the boardwalk, buy some ice cream, have a sleepover." One by one, the messages from Prickle arrived. It seemed the last time she had received so many offers to have fun was when she was 16, when her main concern was to pass her 10th grade exams and have an unforgettable summer. "Let's invite the whole group, just like in the good old days. That would be so much more fun. Each of us will share our life news." Suddenly, Kelly wrote. Maria had an epiphany. Exactly, that's genius. Even though Kelly was Maria's best friend, they also hung out with other girls from school and were even in a small group. There were only 5 of Maria and Kelly's closest friends, Anna, Vanessa, and Molly. Maria treasured her friendships with them and still considered them to be some of the best people in her high school life. Maria still had their mutual group that no one had corresponded with in a long time, and they usually used it only to congratulate each other on holidays. The last time it was active was 4 months ago on her Vanessa's birthday. "Let's write to the girls." I just had time to answer Maria's barbs when a new notification popped up in the general group. It turned out to be a voice message from the whole, which, by the way, was almost 2 minutes long. In all that time, Maria had completely forgotten how much she loved to chat with her friend. And apparently nothing much had changed to this day. Turning on her voices, the girl even flinched. How long since she had heard her friend's voice live? It seemed to her as if it had changed, grown older and harder. "Hey, you guys. Don't be scared, it's true. I'm Kelly. It's been a while since we crossed paths with each other, let alone get together. I understand that everyone has a new life and worries by now. I, for one, have been out in the middle of nowhere and haven't been in our area in a long time. I think you have already understood what I'm going to talk to you all. Agree, it would be nice to meet and just walk around together, as in our school days to go to the movies on the waterfront. We could even hang out in the courtyard of our own 39th. Of course, it's summer now, and some may be on vacation or just out of town. But then you always sign who can and who can't. And in general, how do you feel about this venture? With Maria, I have already signed up. Now we need to talk to the others. If no one can make it tomorrow, we can arrange a meeting any other day. I am in Phoenix until the end of June. Anyway, Maria and I are waiting to hear from everyone. Maria, smiling, listened to Kelly's message and gave it a like. Of course, all of this could have been said in half the time. But on the other hand, Kelly spoke very interestingly. And the girl would have loved to have listened to another such vote. All we had to do was wait. 15 minutes later, Anna spoke up. "Oh, that's someone I didn't expect to hear. Kelly, are you back?" she wrote. Maria immediately read the message in her thin and quiet voice. "I'm only here for a month. I had some business to take care of." "So you can do it," Kelly replied. "Girls, I would love to, but I have no one to leave my daughter with." Anna followed up her message with a sobbing, smiley face. Anna was the youngest, diminutive, fragile of the whole company, but the very first to become a mother. The entire 9th grade school had been cracking up about her relationship with her classmate William since 7th grade. How much did Maria know? She had always dated him. For some reason, they were attracted to each other, despite the fact that both were quite complicated opposite characters. Because of this, their relationship was not ideal. They often quarreled, and during these periods, the school was divided into two camps. Some comforted Anna and said what a jerk William. Not for him such a rose blossomed. Others ran after William and assured him that it was time to forget this fool. After all, he still has time to meet the fate of his life. In any case, the constant pairing of William plus Anna constantly converged, and at graduation, and even announced their engagement. After high school, little was known about Anna. She stopped being visible on social networks. She studied by correspondence. 6 months ago, everyone found out that she and William had a child. The young father worked hard to provide for the family while she was babysitting her daughter. Kelly cursed profusely in Italian in Maria's private messages. She realized that one of her friends would no longer be able to come to the meeting, though Anna had been tirelessly making out with her William, a friend and a person in general. She was a good poet, and Kelly was annoyed. However, she only wrote to the general group about how her daughter was named Evelyn. A reply came in a flash, followed by a picture of the baby in a high chair, smearing mush all over her face. She answered Maria, deciding to herself that she wasn't mentally ready for children yet. Then Molly showed up in the group, a very tall girl with a mop of dark red hair. "I am fine with the idea. I won't be able to come. I'm out of town." Dryly, she answered Kelly's voice. Molly has always been a bit verbose. Maria tried to ask her more questions about things, but Molly went offline and wrote nothing more. This loss, however, didn't upset her too much. Just before graduation, the girl had a big quarrel with the whole company over some trifle. Maria would no longer remember which one, but she remembered the scandal she had caused. Molly had unreasonably attacked her friends. Of course, they made up in the end, but Molly never apologized, and it left a bad taste in my mouth for a long time. The last hope was for Vanessa, but Maria was also waiting for her answer. But unfortunately, she was in no hurry at all. Several hours had already passed. It was noticeably dark outside, and only the distant horizon glowed crimson. Ethan slipped into the balcony and brought Maria some fruit. At the same time, he asked her when she was going to bed. In the end, she realized with sadness that she and Kelly would have to walk alone. She had to admit that their company was truly a thing of the past. All the girls had a new life, overwhelmed with their own affairs and worries, falling asleep. Maria pondered, poring over all her thoughts. She remembered her failed conversation with Ethan and was determined to have it tomorrow, or at the very least, the day after tomorrow if she and Kelly decided to stay the night. However, there was a feeling sitting inside that there was something else she was bound to remember, but had forgotten how she hadn't gotten it all in. She could never understand the reason for her strange anxiety, which was definitely not related to the preparations for the anniversary, but to something more important. She was still studying in bed for a long time. Even Ethan usually still fell asleep about 1 o'clock in the morning already sweetly. sleepily put his arm around his wife's shoulder. That night, Maria dreamed of a gypsy girl, hazy with green eyes, who ran after the girl on a long platform whose end could not be seen, and shouted in a terrible voice, "Write me, Maria, before it is too late. Write to me, or you will shed a lot of tears." In the morning, Maria thoughtfully brushed her teeth, trying to remember the details of the dream of Ethan, who had to work early in the morning, was drinking tea in the kitchen, and almost choked with fear, when he heard a high-pitched, shrill scream from the bathroom. The man rushed to help Maria, imagining in his mind the most horrible pictures, but opened the door, found her jumping for joy with a mouthful of foam from a toothbrush in her hands. The girl quickly disappeared, said mouth, and flew out of the bathroom on wings of happiness. Vanessa responded and said yes for the day, and Anna made arrangements with her grandmother for her daughter. She chanted and drank Ethan's tea in 2 gulps. Ethan and I then ran. The girls agreed to come back late at 10. In a few seconds, the girl changed out of her pajamas and into her dress, grabbed her keys from the nightstand, and ran out into the entryway, leaving her in an empty apartment. Ethan managed only to scratch the back of his head and mutter something that sounded like a butt. The new day promised to be very busy. Kelly, having learned that Vanessa and Anna were coming to the meeting, perked up and wrote that she would be waiting for everyone on the square near the fountain. So now Maria ran across town to the appointed place. She was delighted at this sudden turn, and the strange dream slipped from her mind in a flash. Finally, the girl reached the square and approached a huge fountain of sunlight. Beside it, a lot of children were developing, who were bathing without unnecessary ceremony and splashing all their passing people. Maria waited in pleasant excitement and in anticipation of the imminent meeting. She already imagined how she would tell the girls about her imminent anniversary, about the casting and her new life. "Maria," a familiar ringing voice called out to the girl. Maria turned around, looking for Kelly's eyes, and found her friend stepping out of the cab quickly. She couldn't believe she saw her beloved friend in front of her. Kelly hadn't changed at all. It seemed like only yesterday she was looking at her exactly the same on the last call, bright, smiling, ridiculously shaggy hair, resembling a different barb. The barb swooped into Maria's arms as she pulled away and took another long look at the girl's face. "Squint. I can't tell what's changed. Wait. Did you stop wearing glasses?" It finally dawned on Kelly. Maria laughed in her sophomore year. "Now I wear lenses and you still haven't changed. It's a funny haircut. Not a funny one, but a very new one. It's called a mix. I kind of found myself after that fall. Before that, there was no way in the world they would have made me get a haircut. Kelly, am I glad to see you?" Once again I was touched. Maria repeated, "I'm going to tell you so many things." Only after me my friend laughed and did not waste any time driving Maria to us with ice cream. Kelly showed up bright pink in a tracksuit, sunglasses, and white sneakers, clutching a lightweight sports handbag in her hand. The image was completed by red glossy lipstick on her lips in the color of her manicure. In general, her style had not changed, but Maria for some reason thought that this is how any modern young wife of some oilman looks nowadays. But what who knows about Kelly's private life was little known. But today Maria was going to ask her specifically about everything. And by the look of Kelly herself, it was obvious that she would burst if she didn't share. Unfortunately, no one had thought to discuss the dress code beforehand. And now they were already pretty tired. Maria was in a hurry to get a sporty slash in her shoes and an airy red dress. The girls immediately bought 4 ice cream cones for all their friends and decided to wait in the shade outside the toy store. Suddenly, the doors swung open and a lady with several bags jumped out. Anna dumbfounded, Kelly exhaled. But Maria pulled her back gruffly. "What are you doing?" "It's not her." But the girl turned around and her face lit up with a soft smile. "Oh, girls, did you see me come in here? I thought we were meeting at the fountain." To say Maria was shocked is nothing to say. She only recognized Anna by her angelic voice. That's who really turned into a different person. Anna, visibly recovered. But it didn't look untidy. Rather, on the contrary. She was no longer so abnormally thin. Her body seemed to have become healthier and stronger, On top of that, having always been brown, she had dyed her hair blonde, and it was much longer. She was dressed nicely, but just sported pants and a t-shirt. Seeing her like that was terribly off-putting. After all, in your memories, she was still that coquette, running next to William in heels, defiant miniskirts. But in any case, Maria really liked the new look. All the changes certainly suited her. And here I have bought a couple of boutiques for Emily. He shrugged his shoulders in embarrassment as he stepped closer. I'll just run down to Magen's and drop everything off. You just do not go anywhere. Without waiting for an answer, Lena turned and galloped across the road, leaving Maria and Kelly staring thoughtfully after her. She was so. Kelly sighed. She looked at Maria in bewilderment. Look, Maria, that really was our Anna. Well, a voice like hers answered the girl. That's what motherhood does to people. In a murderous tone said the prickle in Maria's pocket phone. The caller was Vanessa, who appeared to have been sitting by the fountain in company for 20 minutes. She didn't look like she stood out much. She was always quiet and friendly. And in class, she was considered quiet at all. They often experimented with hobbies, but after school, she stopped at knitting. So Maria was not too surprised to see her in a cute, knitted set of skirt and vest when the whole company was in attendance. Immediately after the rapturous, they all went to the movie theater in a noisy group. Everyone was enjoying the ice cream, each talking about something, and Maria, forgetting to listen with interest to the stories of her friends. Unfortunately, Kelly never turned out to be an oilman's wife. On the contrary, she was the only one, according to the girl herself, who was happily single. In spite of this, in her rich narrative, now and then there were glimpses of some incredible cyclists cooking under her window and the expressive waiters of the nearby cafe, and even a charming lecturer. Mostly, though, Kelly chattered about delicious Italian food, the cozy streets of Rome, and her new friends. Anna listened to Kelly with a twinkle in her eye and with bated breath. When it came to her, she was embarrassed. From the story, it seemed that her world now revolved around her daughter. Even the name of the once adored Vlad not once sounded. She spoke in awe of how Evelyn sleeps, eats, how she got her first tooth, and then the second what a beautiful little tale she paid Veronica recently. We could go on and on for the rest of the evening. The situation was saved by Vanessa, who gently turned the attention to herself with her story. Maria was as surprised as she was. Vanessa did not leave her hometown, but stayed to study in Phoenix. But for some reason, the girls hardly ever crossed paths with her on the streets, not in the stores. In general, Vanessa lived an ordinary life, studied, went to the gym, dated a good guy, but the big revelation was Maria. The fact that the girl already had her own fairly successful brand of knitted clothes. Vanessa gave her friends a link to her store's Instagram, which had almost 70,000 followers and lots of rave reviews under the posts. The model who was photographed wearing the items was Vanessa herself. Her slender figure looked perfect on any piece. How beautifully styled her brown hair served as a complement to all the images from the store. Vanessa already had a steady income. That's how seemingly inconspicuous and quiet she achieved it all on her own. By the 21st year, Maria had not had time to listen. The movie started. We went to see something from Marvel. No one but Kelly knew anything about the universe, so she was the only one stuck to the screen, occasionally explaining something to her friends. The rest of us listened for a while, and even during the session kept whispering. Everyone came out of the cinema happy, especially Bright, who was overwhelmed with emotion from watching. To think that it is more interesting to listen in the original. In contrast to the Italian voiceover, I'm already accustomed to watching movies in the original, ranted Kelly. It was past 12:00 p.m., and by mutual agreement, it was decided to go for a bite to eat. Vanessa insisted on going to her favorite kebab stand, which was almost 2 kilometers from the movie theater. Kelly resented it for a bit, but eventually gave in. After all, according to Vanessa, there was such a kebab there. On the other hand, why complain? At least she was wearing sneakers. It was easy for her to run. As they walked toward her, they chatted about everything. But at some point, all eyes turned to Maria. "Honey, didn't we listen to you?" Kelly exclaimed. "Maria, what news about you?" Anna inquired curiously, sparkling her eyes. From surprise, she was at a loss, not knowing where to begin. Girls, I got married last year, she said simply. Really? And I'm finding out about it just now. You could have written at least I'm always open. Ready to share the joy. The prickly girl was indignant. You're not too eager to write me about your Italians either. Could not resist the Barb's girl. But let us all pay attention. Vanessa smiled. Who is he? Kelly added. Maria sighed dreamily, imagining the image of her beloved in her head. His name is Ethan, and we met at camp the summer after school, she said. I thought you could only go to camp until you were 18. Kelly interrupted again, earning a condescending look from Maria. Kelly, listen to me. In the summer, my parents got me a job as a junior camp counselor. To be honest, I didn't really want to go there at all. I didn't think I'd meet my love there. Anyway, Ethan was also a counselor. He was 4 years older than me, so he watched 6th, 7th graders. We crossed paths with him a lot at recess lunches and talked a lot. All in all, I began to consider him a pretty good friend. One day, he invited me to do a poster. I remember that day very well, because it was probably the turning point in my life. We were sitting on the veranda of an empty building that was being renovated. Then he admitted that he liked me from the beginning, first externally, and then when we got to know each other better, and internally, he said that if his sympathy is mutual, we can start dating. I didn't know then what to answer or how to react to that, because at the time I had heard all sorts of things from the parallel. Yeah, and you were proving to everyone at the time that you didn't care about him. That's when Kelly's friend teased me. Come on, it was obvious to everyone that you didn't. Maria chuckled. I actually thought James was right for you. He was very smart and seemed to eventually get his attention. Vanessa sighed. Oh, James was a nerd. Poked a prickle. Still don't understand what Maria saw in him. Maria frowned. Not true. James wasn't bad, but he wasn't Ethan, so we won't discuss him anymore. Let Maria go on with her story. A quiet plea was heard. Anna. And Maria continued. Ethan started sending me cute surprises. Notes, bouquets of wild flowers. For the rest of the shift, I thought about his proposal, and at one point I realized that he was much better than James. Before I knew it, I was head over heels in love too. I decided to stay at camp for the rest of the summer so he would be there for me. We did all the activities together, helped each other out, and ran to the pond at night to make out. Maria felt her cheeks flush from those tumultuous. But such dear memories when the summer was over. He kept coming to my house, despite the fact that he lived almost across town. Last May, when Ethan was on vacation, we decided to go camp counseling again at the camp where we had once met, and by the same pond. He proposed to me. Maria spoke so heartfeltly that the friends didn't notice that they had been standing in the middle of the road listening to Maria and Ethan's love story for several minutes. When was the girl finished? There was a strange silence. How romantic. At last, Anna said, in a helpless tone, Yes, it's our anniversary. By the way, soon in 2 weeks. Come on, opened her eyes Kelly. Oh, you, Maria. You know, girls, I'm so happy to see you all again. I thought a day with you wouldn't be enough, so maybe you can come to the party. I'll talk to Ethan, but I don't think he'll mind. It would be great to introduce you to him. Kelly, you're not leaving on the 29th. The 29th. No, I'm not leaving till the 30th. Wait, are you inviting us? Vanessa asked incredulously. Yes, I am. You're not strangers to me. And Ethan is always for making new acquaintances, Maria answered. Okay, I'll be there. Kelly jumped up. What can I get you? What do you want? You can just come. I won't be offended. Warmly, Maria smiled. I will certainly come too. You just write about it. What if your Ethan will still be against it? And I want to know what time and where to go. Vanessa responded. One Anna hesitated indefinitely. I'll try. She sighed at last. Time passes quickly while I sit on a bench and eat a big kebab with a lot of laughter and conversation. The friends chatted for a long time about something, but Maria didn't. Remember why she was looking at her family's faces. She was overwhelmed by simple happiness and divorce. Laughing, holding a kebab in her outstretched hand, from which the sauce dripped copiously. Through laughter, she said, "Vanessa, if this kebab, I do not grow a diamond tooth." "Eat, eat," Kelly admonished Vanessa. "You'll get all the sauce, and it won't taste good." Suddenly, she pigeonholed Kelly's hand. Maria loved long summer walks more than anything else in the world, and that day was all about it. The girls rode on electric scooters, their authentic on the promenade, where beating balls in a children's shooting gallery ran along the edge of the fountain. About almost all clothes, even restless. Anna, constantly thinking about her Evelyn, eventually relaxed, loosened up, and began to get off more than anyone else. After making her way around the mall, she hopped on a gurney in the store, and Kelly launched her all over the parking lot. In the park, they took long pictures of Kelly's wearing dark glasses and uploaded some new posts to Instagram. In short, each of the girls got a full taste of carefree teenage life. That day, when it started to feel like it, they decided to head back to the plaza. On the way, Kelly shared funny stories with the Italians about Anne Maria and the recent casting of Maria. "But you're lucky after all. I read Vanessa. I've known that since high school. Remember when you did those history tests? You did it by rote all the time, and you still got straight A's. And now, you might say, by sheer coincidence, I was called to make a movie." Did you even ask Kelly what the movie was about? There was something about equestrianism that Maria was vaguely referring to. That's quite an application. Are you going to be an equestrian? It's a whistle and a bard. No, but is training included in the contract? The girl answered, "Actually, I do not mind to learn to ride a horse. And for my part, no super difficult tricks are not required." I'm shocked. Vanessa just continued to marvel aloud. Do you know how much equestrian lessons cost nowadays? And you, Maria, can all that just happen to you? You're just lucky. Usually people say that sarcastically, but I'm dead serious. It's not certain that I'll get the part. Maria chuckled nervously. With your lucky will, Vanessa assured her. That was why Maria was afraid to share her beginnings with anyone. Everyone had high hopes for her, and Maria was afraid of not meeting them. Vanessa, meanwhile, had completely broken up. And your boyfriend sounds like a great guy. He didn't take his time and almost immediately proposed to me. Here's my David and I. We've been dating for 5 years now, and it's not like we're fighting. But I still haven't gotten a proposal from him. It's like we're standing still. Maybe I should bring him to your party too. He'll think about it. Maria somehow got confused and hurried to change the subject. Girls, it's late. I do not want to go away. So I suggest we rent a hotel room and have an overnight stay. I didn't have to convince anyone. Everyone was all for it. Even Anna decided that sometimes you have to let yourself relax, and asked Grandma to keep an eye on her daughter for another day. Maria also wanted to warn Ethan about her decision, but as if reading her mind, her husband called her himself. "Hey, Maria, you're home already." Did his voice come out of the phone? "No, aren't you back yet too?" The girl wondered. "No, not yet. I got held up at work today. I haven't got time for anything. I'll probably be home. It's very late." What a nightmare. I shook my head. "Maria, but good luck. Then don't write. Work hard. I'll stay with the girls tonight. You don't mind? We'll get a room at the hotel." "All right." Ethan agreed easily. "Thanks for the heads up. Have fun then. Kisses. Love you too." Ethan hung up the phone. He worked as a realtor, doing sales, an apartment in a new building. Maria didn't know much about the profession, but she thought it was very responsible and heavy girls have a rubber band. "I can't get my hair back," shouted Vanessa from the bathroom. "I think I had some." Maria responded, "Look in the bag." Vanessa ran out in the white bathrobe issued by the hotel and went through Maria's bag. While she was sorting out the TV, there was a huge TV in the room which you could connect to and watch your favorite movies. But first, she had to figure out how to do it, which is what Maria was doing now. The sleepover was in full swing, and the other friends took turns doing all the evening routines. "Maria, how much junk do you have here before you turn on the movie?" Vanessa carefully took out her hairbrush, a few pens, lipstick, a mirror, tissues, and a charger for her phone. Finally, the rubber bands. "What's all this paper you've got here?" Vanessa pulled out a strange scrap of paper and unfolded it. Here is the number of some Gypsy Jofranca. She read fortune-telling Maria. Do you believe in fortune-telling? Do you do astrology? Maria turned around. Yes, I met some strange woman at the train station. She predicted me something else to write, she asked. Wow, and let's write for fun. Vanessa got excited. And with the movie still nothing comes out. She's only going to make you money. Grew up. Where did you come from, Kelly? We're not stupid enough to send her money. Just a chat. What if she's just guessing? Vanessa shrugged. Maria suddenly remembered today's dream and cold shivers ran down her spine. After all, that Gypsy had really guessed her husband's name exactly, and that they were preparing for a significant event. Is there such a thing as a coincidence? Mariah, what shall we write to your Jofranca? Vanessa snapped her out of her stupor. Well, let's write it. Shall we write for Maria, or shall we tell a story of our own? Vanessa asked. No, let's do it for me. After all, she asked me to do it. Maria took out her phone and typed in the Gypsy's number. Hello, Jofranca. This is Maria. I met you at the station yesterday. I'm writing about your divination. I would like to know more. What did you mean? The girl typed quickly. You think it's all right? Maria frowned doubtfully, showing the text to his girlfriends. And what she foretold you that? Instead of an answer, Kelly asked. Vanessa was also peering curiously over her shoulder. Garbage, really, Maria sighed, and sent a message. A couple of minutes later, a reply from the Gypsy girl came. Hello, Maria. I remember you and your problem, the woman wrote. I confess that I was very worried that you would not take my warning properly and not write. Maria raised his eyebrows. Had that Jofranca known that Maria's desire to write to her was no more than a coincidence. I am willing to help you on one condition. The woman continued to write. Now she's begging for money. Kelly rolled her eyes. My divination will only work when you are alone with your soul, not under someone else's pressure, but alone. Only then will I be able to see the truth. But I'm glad you wrote almost at midnight. It's a time when you feel especially connected to the universe. I just want to see if you're alone. If you are, can we get started on what's straining Maria? No, Kelly, look. She didn't ask for money, Vanessa giggled. So there's still more to come. Snickered this. Maria, are you really going to step aside to be alone with your soul? No, of course not, Maria answered. I'm afraid of her. You know, I wouldn't risk it. I'm not sure if it came from behind. What if she gets excited, and it doesn't go according to plan, and she'll curse us all? Yeah, and so just Maria laughed at Kelly. Are you seriously believing this nonsense? But I had a bad experience. Shyly continued Anna. These gypsies always made me afraid. Mash, you're better really, and I'm not angry. What if this is a test? Communicate in the bathroom where there is no one. And better not at all. The girl sighed heavily, but after a few more slept, decided to follow the advice of seclusion. Who knew what this Jofranca was like? Maria herself had already regretted agreeing to write to her, but the correspondence had already begun, and just to merge from the conversation conscience did not allow. Maria locked herself in the knot and sat down on the edge of the bathtub. You did not answer me, Maria. Are you alone now? Yes, the girl wrote. So what do I have to do? That's fine. Now I'll tell you everything. It's almost midnight and everything should go smoothly. Are you ready to start the reading? I'm ready. Maria always had fun with this kind of game, but now it was suddenly very creepy. As I read Jofranca's message, her low voice immediately sounded in my head, and the image from the dream rose before my eyes. I couldn't see your husband clearly last time because a dark fog had started up next to him. But I need to see his face before we can proceed. Send me a picture of him. After long and several minutes of deliberation, the girl did send a picture of her lover. The Gypsy girl was silent for a while, which made Maria all the more worried. But it turned out that Jofranca had been writing a huge text the whole time. Thank you, Maria. The picture fits. I had to print it out and do some machinations to figure out what your husband is hiding. Fortunately, the energy is off the charts at this hour, and it didn't take as long as at any other time of the day. I could clearly see how all your impulses to help him break down the wall that had grown between you. Maria didn't want to read any further. This gypsy woman has a chasm, and then a wall of sorts, it seems. She can't make up her own mind. This is not the first time I have encountered something like this. Even a novice in this business would have no trouble figuring out what is going on in your relationship. Someone is forcibly pulling Ethan out of your family and doing it in an unholy way. Whether someone is bringing him in is yet to be seen. We need more information, but they did it by all the rules. A stronger spell on your husband wouldn't be so hard to get back, but Ethan himself seems to like it. It's a strange attraction to a new companion. I know it's not easy to accept, but fortune-telling always tells the truth. They're more powerful than any other means. But it may take a lot of strength, energy, and sessions to change things and bring Ethan back. Maria was suddenly struck with a wave of rage. How dare that imposter talk about Ethan? What kind of spell? What kind of nonsense was she talking? There was not the slightest hesitation. She added Joe Franca's number to a blacklist, cleared her correspondence, and turned off her phone. Then she sat alone frowning for a while longer until there was a knock on the door. "Maria, what is it? What did she tell you? Have you been pounding on the door for so long, Kelly? I hope you didn't pay her. Those gypsies always do that first, and then give you money." Maria didn't tell her friends about what Joe Franca had written. She said she was scared, and on Anna's advice decided not to get involved in such a thing, and sat in the bathroom for a long time. For natural reasons. After an almost sleepless night with her friends, Maria was watering her nose all day and decided to talk to Ethan about the holiday. Only toward evening did she make coffee, settle down at the kitchen table, and wait for the man to come out of the shower. There was his phone on the table, and from nothing to do, Maria opened the camera on it and began to cringe. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared in the kitchen. When he noticed Maria, he took one step closer and snatched the smartphone out of her hands. "What are you, a balloon in my phone?" he asked tensely. "Why are you taking it without asking?" He looked at the screen, saw only an open camera, and was embarrassed. "Do you have something to hide?" Maria asked Maria with a frown. "I'm sorry, I'm all on edge. I've got nothing to hide from work now. I had some documents prepared there. I thought you closed them." "Okay, I get it. I didn't even block it. I was actually gonna talk to you about our anniversary." "Oh, I'm listening to you very carefully." Ethan got his relaxed look back. He made himself some coffee too, and sat down across from me, slowly stirring his spoon. "Anyway, Ethan, I'm a little confused about the plan for our party. We wanted to come up with our own personalized holiday plan, and that's where we left off. There are, and half the population expressed their doubts. We have enough time. We can have time to replay, or at least add to the program something like this," smirked her husband. "I do not know. Honestly, I thought that we're cool as it is, without any scope. But it's going to be a great party. And what would you want, something a little bit different? Why would you want an unconventional boat? Not everybody's going to jump in the water on their anniversary." The man shrugged his shoulders. "Ethan, you talk like you don't care." "I do care, Maria. I just thought we talked about it. It's all arranged. The program's planned. It's great. I don't see the point in changing it. So you're against it? You want to keep it the way it is, even though you know your wife doesn't like it." Maria raised her voice unexpectedly, even to herself, "And I think you're just tired. It's been a long day. And now let's go, and I'm going to bed for you. Tomorrow, if it still bothers you, can we talk about it again?" Ethan gently put his arm around his wife's shoulders and led her to the bedroom. Maria did not resist. To be honest, she would have liked to curl up and doze off sweetly in Ethan's arms. But for some reason, she decided that it was crucial to have this conversation this very evening. Now she had already changed her mind. Besides, she couldn't understand why she had been so strange and rude to Ethan. Could it really be because she was overworked? Not before the rash. Before she went to bed, Maria said languidly, "I invited my friends to a party. You don't mind, do you?" "What friends?" "I do not understand, Ethan, with whom you went out." "Yes, I do not mind, I do not mind." "Get down. Hurry up," my husband answered. "Your eyes are falling asleep." I'll come in a moment too. Maria fell asleep instantly. The next day, she was able to get out of bed only at noon. Completely out of the born energy, Ethan by that time had long been at work. But even when he returned, the girl did not bring up yesterday's subject. She realized that Ethan was not eager to change anything, to start an argument. Not at all. After all, nothing would happen. If the anniversary passed without a twist, that was what Maria decided for herself. Of course, she was a little sad, but she certainly was not going to get depressed over such a trifle. The holiday was coming up, so she should be happy. She just asked her husband again about the girlfriends, because she'd simply forgotten that she'd asked him that before she fell asleep, but his answer didn't change. He didn't mind getting to know his wife's close high school friends. A few more days passed, in which there was nothing noteworthy, as Ethan was away at work all day. Maria decided to bring her brother over so he wouldn't get bored at daycare. Almost none of his friends stayed for the summer shift. Together, they walked in the park, danced in the kitchen, cooked meals, and made the apartment comfortable in every way. Maria generally noted that Ethan would be a great host in the future. He diligently dusted, watered all the flowers, and even picked up the fallen rose petals from Maria's bouquet in a vase. The holiday was a week away, and the girl was in a very bad mood. There were only a few things she was worried about. A gift for her husband, which was not going to arrive in time for the due date. Because of my husband, who was heavily burdened at work, Ethan came very late, was tired and not much of a talker. However, he explained that he was purposely working more hours and substituting for coworkers so he could take a few days off for the holiday. "Hello, Maria," Ethan called. "Somehow I'm coming over tonight too. It's late. Go to bed without me." Again, Maria said disappointedly, "Ethan, I think you've already worked for a whole vacation." "Yes, I know I have." Frustrated, the man muttered, "My own mind is already blowing. These apartments in the new building is a pain in the ass with one family for a week, cannot solve anything. But these are the last days. I promise I'll rest later. Okay, but I'm worried. What time will you be back home?" The girl asked. "I don't know, Maria, as it happens. Late." Ethan hung up. Maria took a sullen breath and put the phone away. Her gaze flicked to the clock, which showed 9 p.m., which gave her an idea, and she remembered her present, which was already running late. She bought an expensive wristwatch with precious stones for Ethan. She'd noticed how he'd been looking at it for a long time, so she'd been saving up for that watch for almost 2 months. If they really don't make it in time, would she really have to show up at an anniversary without a present for her lover? Maria quickly grabbed her laptop from the nightstand to check on the website where the watch is now and if there are ways to somehow speed up the delivery. On the screen was a chat room with Cindy. The laptop was tethered to her husband's phone. Ethan often communicated with clients through it. So Maria just rolled up the correspondence. She scoured the internet for a long time, looking for the information she needed, until a message notification popped up in the corner from that very Cindy. "All in all, I have everything ready to check out. What I need is what I ordered in general," she wrote. Attached to the message was a picture. Normally, Maria was never interested in what Ethan was chatting about with his customers. But this time, for some reason, she suddenly had the urge to click on the box and read it. Given this sudden impulse, she opened the correspondence. It began yesterday's day, and it was clear from the content that it was not complete. Apparently, Ethan had cleaned up the chat room before that. "Cindy, better look at other options. With shipping, we'll only have a couple of days until the 29th. And according to the instructions, you have to apply this poison for at least a week before it works, so we won't have time." "Ethan, yeah, that's not good enough. What are the alternatives?" "Cindy, I don't know. We'll have to see." "I thought you were free already. I'm just busy at the moment. It's not convenient to talk. You'd better go on the internet." "Ethan, yeah, I'll give it a try. Then I won't be distracted as a freebie." "Right, and I'll pick you up by car." Maria clapped his eyes in amazement. The messages were sent at 6 o'clock last night. So why had Ethan confirmed that he was already available? Maria, he then called, as usual, and said he would stay late at work. And anyway, what are we talking about here? The girl shook her head and then kept on writing. Ethan, I think, found the right fit. The store is not as big, but you have to wait less for delivery. They say it kills almost instantly. I've seen it myself, and the concentration is just right. I'll send you a picture. By the way, are you free yet? Cindy, yeah, I'm on my way out. Ethan, Cindy, you or me? I never answered. Ordering. Cindy, wait. I haven't looked at it yet. I'm already getting dizzy with all these squads. Why is your wife in so much trouble? Ethan, there won't be any trouble soon. There's only a week left. Maria clutched at her laptop and tried to read on. But the letters tumbled in front of her eyes. She was only covering scraps of further correspondence. She couldn't wait to get it over with. The wife has no idea that a new life is coming. The correspondence ended with the very message from Cindy with a picture attached. The photo showed a black jar with a skull, and the caption below was your order complete. Get it at the pickup point. June 26 to 27. Suddenly, Ethan's reply popped up, apparently sent just now from his phone. That's right. Well done, Cindy. Maria slammed the notebook shut and stared at the wall. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. No, this could not be. Such a thing is simply impossible. It was running through her head. Maria had tears streaming down her cheeks uncontrollably. She opened and closed the laptop several times, as if she could not believe her eyes. But the ill-fated correspondence had not disappeared, was not a figment of her sick imagination. Only the words and messages were more and more burned into her memory and inflamed her soul. Maria didn't remember falling asleep. She did not remember how she looked at Ethan the next morning with empty eyes. So dear and precious. She did not remember how he had told her again, before he left, that he would be back late. She didn't remember kissing the top of her head goodbye. She stood on the balcony for a long time, looking down as her husband got into the car and drove away. For some reason, she remembered the songs on the radio when she and her husband drove together. Ethan had so much fun singing along to them, often talking about mistresses and cheating. Could the girl ever have imagined that the lyrics of those songs would be prophetic? Maria felt nothing, no pain, no sadness, no rage, only a total emptiness. It was as if all her energy had been drained out of her in an instant. It took a long time to realize it. More precisely, Maria herself kept him away. His girlfriend didn't want to believe it. She simply could not allow the idea that her husband was capable of betraying, hiding, cheating. More than once in her life, she had been disappointed in people, lost friends, endured betrayal. But all these things had happened to ordinary people who came and went, who you could just let go and meet someone new. And it was Ethan, her husband, the most beloved, the closest relative. She could never imagine being with anyone other than Ethan, and she could never imagine Ethan with anyone other than herself, much less with Cindy. She tried to imagine her rival, but she couldn't. She could only think of banal internet hotties with their pouty lips and makeup that made them look like clones of each other. Maria could hardly believe that her husband had a crush on someone like that. Ethan, on the other hand, had always ridiculed this fashion of looking like each other. Then who did he like? Who? Maria lay there almost all day. In his room, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince himself that what he had seen last night was just a dream, a silly nightmare. Every time the girl clutched her eyes shut, that creepy correspondence came back to her. Maria had already learned it almost by heart, but for some reason, it was as if she still needed confirmation. She opened her laptop and found the very same chat room, which was empty. Ethan cleared it again. Maybe nothing really existed after all. Maybe that meant Maria was so worried about the holiday, about Ethan, about being late, and about the gift that she had just lost her mind. Lying on the bed, the girl thought that she would have enjoyed this arrangement far more than finding out about her husband's cheating. Not even just cheating. They were going to poison her, kill her on her anniversary. Look at that, and calculated everything to be in time for the holiday and picked the right poison. Maria even grinned. No, her Ethan is still the smartest. I wonder how she and Cindy are going to get out of this in front of Mom and Dad. Because if Maria got it right, it would have to be on the day of the party. They're not going to slip her a poisoned drink right in front of the guests, are they? Or had the couple planned their murder for the morning, or even the day before? Maria suddenly remembered the gypsy. It turns out she was right. Was it magic? Spirits? Was there really a connection to the universe? Had Cindy seduced Ethan? But at that moment, Maria felt too shattered to know what was going on. Still, what she had seen explained why Ethan was so indifferent to her request to diversify the anniversary program. Why bother when now the date of June 29 would be celebrated not as the day the family was founded, but as the day Maria died? Maria wiped away a burning tear that ran down her cheek. No, after all, on her tombstone, she would ask to be recorded under her maiden name. Kelly was right. It didn't suit her at all. Maria suddenly jumped out of bed. What kind of a thought was that? She wasn't going to die, not from some stupid poison. Right now, the most important thing was not to drink or eat anything out of his hands or leave anything unattended around him. No, I'd better go straight to my parents' house. Oh my God, is she really thinking of a plan? How to save herself from her own husband? How absurd is that? I think I've definitely lost my mind. I thought, pulling my stuff out of the closet, I had to get out of here before it was too late. The apartment wasn't mine anyway. What else is there to wait for when Ethan put poison in the morning tea? The girl took a loud step with her nose and suddenly changed her mind. No, she's not just going to leave it all alone. She must wait for the party and reveal Ethan's true face in front of all the guests. Throw the poisoned drink in his face. Maria suddenly realized that the emptiness inside her had been replaced by pain. But it was still hard, unbearable. Nothing had ever caused her so much pain. How to devise revenge on her own beloved husband? She shoved all the stuff back in. Turns out it was already 7 p.m. Ethan was due back in a couple of hours. Maria decided to put on some makeup so he wouldn't notice her puffy face and ask what had happened. It took her a long time to put on makeup because her makeup was often ruined by tears, thin pens running from her eyes. By the time Ethan Maria arrived, she had managed to calm herself down. He took a long look at her face, but said nothing. As soon as her husband went to change, leaving his phone on the nightstand, the girl immediately turned on the screen. It was the first time she was really going to go through someone else's smartphone to find out more information about that Cindy and see who else she was dealing with. Maria immediately saw a new message from her Ethan on the block screen. No news. How is your Maria? Still no clue. She could barely stop herself from throwing the phone against the wall. She couldn't bear to look at it, so she ran, locked herself in the bathroom, and turned the water on full so no one could hear her sobbing. The pain inside her was replaced by rage, resentment, anger. Her life was ruined in one single day. First, she received a punch in the gut when she learned that the person closest to her didn't love her and had betrayed her. Then she realized that he and his mistress were already planning to kill her. And on top of that, a silly, almost childish one came even closer. If you think of everything else, resentment for spending $2,000 on a gift for her husband. Maria had no idea how, with all this, to manage to stay afloat and pretend that everything was all right. The fateful day of June 29 came. Maria decided to dress for the last time. It could have turned out that way. She wore a fancy red dress in the color of her stiletto heels and wore bright, almost vulgar makeup. Maria insisted that Ethan drive to the lake alone, and she would get there a little later with her parents, supposedly to surprise him with her image. Dad and Ethan Jr. were waiting in the yard in the old Toyota, and Mom decided to go up to the apartment to check on and embroider her daughter. But Maria had been there for years, and she hadn't put on makeup. I haven't seen you like this once today, but your daughter looks good on you. You'll be the most beautiful today, Helen urged. The woman had already had time to run around the apartment to check on her daughter's surroundings. Maria, don't you come any closer, she shouted from the next room. You have a huge bouquet. It is crumbling here. Half of the flowers are dry. You prune them. I actually kind of forgot about it. I could hardly hear. Maria responded, but come here. It is necessary to put the bouquet in order, and at once we will run. Helen held out a pair of scissors to Maria. You cut the stems off the healthy flowers to make them last longer, and I will not climb." Maria did not resist and obediently complied with her mother's request. Looking at Ethan's almost finished bouquet, she began to drown in her own vile thoughts again. When my mother confusedly said, "Oh, Mash, I think I cut something wrong. On the hand of a woman there was a whole bud. I somehow accidentally cut it off, along with a leaf. The flower is somehow artificial, by the way." "All right, I'll throw it away." "No, Mom, give it to me. I will love you just as long as the last of these roses will not wither." She remembered Maria's words and held the cut-off bud of that very first artificial flower to herself. She certainly could not allow herself to cry right in front of her mother, so she continued pruning the remaining roses. Ouch! Suddenly the girl shrieked. "What are you cutting?" Helen was frightened. It was a little accident. Maria bit his lip. A scarlet drop of blood appeared on his finger. "It seems Maria was destined to be red today. You seem distracted today," her mother said reproachfully. "You haven't slept, have you?" "I was up all night worrying." "That's all right. We'll work on it. Where's your first aid kit? You're gonna be okay. Is it a big wound?" "No, of course not. Unless you look deep into the heart. Look at me." Helen deftly lifted her daughter by the chin and looked into her eyes. "Maria, you're not wearing a face. What's the matter with you?" "There's nothing wrong with you." Maria remained silent. She carefully freed herself from her mother's arms and looked around the apartment. That's it. After this holiday, Maria would only be able to come back here to get her things. Until a week ago, she couldn't have imagined that it could all come to an abrupt end when she and her mother finally got in the car. Ethan Jr. asked her father to turn on the radio, but Maria stopped him for the first time, and she didn't want to hear those songs because they were associated only with her husband. The car pulled up to the dock, where a large white boat was parked. Festive music was being played. All the guests were already assembled. On one side, the relatives were assembled and were discussing vigorously, while on the other side, the dressed-up Kelly, Anna, and Vanessa were counting. In the middle stood Ethan, surrounded by his friends. When the guests noticed the Toyota pulling up in their necks, they hurried toward it, eager to be the first to see Maria. However, the crowd, as if on cue, parted before Ethan. He was a chic white suit with a bouquet of beautiful blue flowers in his hands like a fairy prince, greeting his princess from the carriage. He opened the door and bent down in front of Maria, holding out his hand with an embarrassed smile on his face. The girl climbed out of the Majin and gently embraced her beloved husband, causing long sighs to sweep through the crowd in unison. That smile through the pain Maria had practiced all last night. "You look irresistible," Ethan whispered in her ear. "Congratulations, my dears," rustled and shouted someone. I think it was Aunt Oksana, Ethan's godmother. "What a beautiful couple you are. Happily married for a year now. Maria, you're a goddess." Kelly's friend got the jump on her. The couple couldn't get away with congratulations. Maria got hold of a few more bouquets and gift bags. Ethan gently picked her up on his arm and busied himself on deck. All aboard joyfully called Ethan. All week, her husband had never noticed the detached state of Maria. So now, she did not even have to work hard to create for him the image of a knave, happy fool. While the boat was getting ready to leave, she chatted with Ethan's parents for a while, introduced her friends to the guests. She listened to her father's anecdotes and even drank a shot of beer given by him with grief. But now the boat was sailing over the water. Ethan took Maria by the hand and summoned the guests. The girl looked around frightened. When the two of them stood before everyone, the happy guests looked at the couple with glowing eyes and clapped their hands. What was going on? What was Ethan up to? Ethan held his hand up to encourage silence and then said, "I am glad to welcome you all to our celebration. On this day, exactly 1 year ago, a wonderful thing happened. Maria and I were married. I can remember like yesterday looking at her like an angel in a white dress with eyes in love. As we twirled in a waltz, the man squeezed her ears harder, Maria's fingers. The girl's heart clenched desperately, and she burst. An unpleasant lump entered her throat. It seems like we've been together forever, and it's only been a year. A lot has changed in our lives during that year. I've had a lot of problems with my work. It was very difficult for me at times. I thought I couldn't cope. But I had an important meaning for which I could move mountains. And that meaning was you, Maria. After all, after the hardest day, I would come home and see you smile, hear your voice, and realize that it wasn't all for nothing. I was always sure it would all work out in the end because you were there for me. Maria, you are my inspiration, my motivation, my life. I'm sure there are a lot of happy moments ahead of us. Thank you for being in my life. Ethan suddenly pressed Maria against him and kissed her hotly in surprise. She even staggered. Then he turned to Helen and Robert. Thank you for raising such a daughter and sending her to camp one day to work as a camp counselor. And thank you all. He turned to the others who had come to share the joy today. Maria did not notice how she already clumsily smears tears on her face. Was it all just a prearranged, memorized text? Is Ethan really that duplicitous? Sunshine? What is it? He asked tenderly, squatting down in front of Maria and squeezing her hands in his. Maria, what are you? Are you happy? That you have such a golden husband? Shouted Anna. She was just very upset. It's all right. Maria was always very impressionable. Voices came from everywhere. And the mountain suddenly jumped up somewhere and returned a few seconds later with a mug of water in his hands. Maria took it and drank it. Maria touched the glass with trembling hands and took a long look at the liquid. Inside it looks like ordinary water, but they must have thought it through. Maria, what's the matter with you? I'm fine, Ethan worried. He looked into the girl's face and seemed to want to add something else. But she suddenly splashed water in his face in anger. Someone in the crowd cried out in shock. The mocked girl whispered angrily. The girl was even more torn. Why are you doing this to me? What have I done to both of you? I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. She snapped and ran to her quarters, not wanting to see anyone. Confused, they were soaking wet. Ethan looked around in panic and hurried after her. Running in Maria's heels was uncomfortable, so the man quickly caught up with her and grabbed her arm. But Maria twisted out of her shoes and hurried down to her quarters, locking herself in. A few seconds later, a knock sounded. Maria. Maria, open up. What is it? Please, Maria, answer what I said wrong. Maria was silent. She slowly slid down the door and covered her face with her hands. Only occasionally Ethan would hear her sobbing softly. Maria, why are you crying? Please don't cry. Explain to me what happened. Why didn't you tell me right away that something was wrong? Did your husband speak from behind the door? He didn't seem to have any idea what was going on. Maria could tell by the voices that someone had approached him. But Ethan said to wait for them both upstairs. Please open the door. Desperately he asked, again turning to his wife. Tell me, what happened? What happened? At last she spoke. You have to ask Cindy. Maria, thank God you are all right. Her husband breathed out a sigh of relief. Which Cindy are you talking about? The one you were planning to kill me with? Kill you? Ethan gasped. I've already seen that you're good at it, but don't pretend, Ethan. Now I know how duplicitous you can be. What makes you think anyone's going to kill you? Not someone, but you and your mistress. I saw your correspondence on the laptop about the poison, about me, about your coddling poison. You saw the correspondence with Cindy? Yes, which, by the way, you visited regularly. Jesus, Maria, Maria. Wait, it's not what you think. Ethan was short of breath. I'll open the door. I'll tell you everything. That's why I cleared the chats with her, so you wouldn't see and make up things you shouldn't. We must have forgotten once. Open up, please. Not a chance, she said angrily. No, I don't. You think if the poison didn't work, you could lay him down with your hands. There was no poison, Ethan exclaimed in frustration. Well, there was, but it was rat poison. I poisoned the rats. You've got a very bad imagination. Maria remarked slyly. It was a surprise for you, which, by the way, has just gone bad, the man replied. Dead rats? No. Remember when you said you wanted a raisin for your anniversary? And I said I'd be fine without it. Well, I didn't say that because I didn't care, but because I already had a raisin. Only she was supposed to be the surprise. The plan was that when we sailed, we would be met by 2 white horses, on which the 2 of us would go on a horseback ride. Just maybe you're about to become an actress. That movie is just about horseback riding. So I rented 2 horses for 2 months so you could train on them yourself. There were some problems where to keep them. So I had to buy a little old stable from a grandfather. It was a wreck. So Cindy and I went out almost every day the last week, cleaned the inside, and generally put everything in order. Cindy is an equestrian trainer and my second cousin. I haven't seen her in years. How are you doing with those girlfriends of yours? So I asked her to come to Phoenix so I wouldn't have to hire an unfamiliar trainer. We were already way overdue to make it to the anniversary because it turns out there was a whole settlement of wild rats in that old stable. Seriously, I had never seen so many before. I had to order some poison and poison it right away. Ethan was silent for a few seconds, as if choosing his words. That's it, I guess. I've just given you the surprise I've been preparing for almost 3 weeks. And now you can open the door for me. And the gypsy told me that you were seduced. Barely audible, Maria said, opening the door. She and Ethan stared at each other and the world for a long time. The girls were gradually saturated with colors again. What kind of gypsy? At last Ethan asked. He had a kinder smile on his face. The one I met at the railway station, the girl replied, wiping away her tears. She was right after all. What my husband's name, and that our anniversary was coming up. So the rest might have been confirmed too. Maria, don't scare me, Ethan asked. Anyone would tell you that from the pendant around your neck. Maria froze. She touched the pendant on her neck. Ethan had the exact same one. They were making pairs to order for a wedding. The pendant was engraved Maria plus Ethan, equal love, so she thought I was a fool. Or maybe she was. Maria whispered. Maria, come on. Ethan pulled her over and hugged her tightly. Like a baby. I myself once cut Sarog like that. A market fortune teller of 16 years predicted that I would never meet my love. But you see, none of that means anything. Maria cried again, for the umpteenth time today. But this time it was the realization that all was well again. All her suspicions turned out to be mere fiction, a delusion, a figment of someone else's imagination. And it was not for nothing that the prickle had warned her not to take the word of any fortune teller. And Maria, who had always considered herself a pragmatic, serious person, took the bait of the gypsy. Who would you tell that story to? They would laugh. It would be embarrassing in front of the guests, mumbled the girl. Now they'll think I'm just a typical hysterical girl. You gave me such a fantastic party, and this is how I thanked you. Ethan grinned. Honey, you're not your usual hysterical self. You're the best, most unpredictable one of all. That's why I love you, I guess. How could I have thought that about you? Maria huddled tightly against her husband with relief. Only today my mother accidentally broke that artificial rose from the bouquet. It was not a good thing. Ethan wiped the tears from his wife's cheeks with tenderness. No roses can express my love for you, my Maria. But if you wish, I will give you a new, more lasting one. He picked up his wife on his arm and carried her upstairs to the light. Maria leaned her head on his shoulder and smiled happily. How nice that June 29th is still the day of the wedding of the family. A glimpse of Kelly was mistaken after all. After all, that last name turned out to be the best one for Maria.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Betty looked out of the cab window at the cityscapes running by and smiled. She was on her way home from the airport, her business trip unexpectedly postponed. The chief had called her boss, with whom Betty was already preparing to go through passport control, and informed her that there was no need to fly anywhere today. Let's go home. Clara, the chief accountant of their company, ordered. Today we rest. Tomorrow I'll see you at the office. Betty couldn't believe her sudden good fortune. A whole free day and Mason, just at home, took a vacation for a week, and daughter Molly flew with her parents to Miami. Finally, she and her husband would have some alone time. They needed it so badly. After all, lately both of them catastrophically do not have enough time for each other. But before it was different. Compliments, admiring glances, walks, romantic acts, surprises without reason, and talk about everything in the world. When did it change? With the birth of her daughter or with Betty's going to work after a prolonged maternity leave? The woman couldn't remember the exact moment when Mason began to drift apart. It seemed to have been going on for about 3 years. Betty missed her spouse's jokes, attention, and care. She sincerely missed her formerly loving husband. The mere sight of him made a woman feel loved and attracted. Of course, Betty understood. Mason has a serious job. He often has to fly to Boston, where their company opened a large branch 4 years ago. He practically lives there, sometimes staying for weeks at a time, tired. It's understandable that he doesn't have time for romance. No, Mason honestly fulfilled all the duties of a husband and father, provided their family with everything they needed, spent his free time with his daughter, never gave up household chores. Yet Betty realized it was time for a change. She wanted that warmth back. This free day to spend alone with her husband was just the right thing to do. It would be good for their relationship, as if fate itself were helping them. Betty quietly opened the door with her key. She wanted the effect of surprise, to see her husband's surprised and delighted face. She tiptoed into the hallway. From their bedroom came Mason's quiet voice. He was on the phone, probably being disturbed from work again. He often received calls and texts, even at night, and on weekends or holidays, he could easily be called to the office or to the site. What can you do? He was an important person in a large construction company. But the paycheck was right. Betty was not the kind of wife who threw tantrums at her busy husband, demanding attention. She understood that her husband was trying for the sake of their family, even felt sorry for him, and was grateful to him for this work, and was proud of such a busy and irreplaceable husband. And now the woman did not interfere with Mason, lurked at the front door, and decided to let him finish his conversation and then discover his arrival. But her husband's tone was strange, clearly non-businesslike. Betty involuntarily listened to the words. "Sweetheart, but I'll make a deal. They'll give you a few days of rest, come." Why would I pass up a chance like that? "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I'll buy you tickets, of course, but when else will it happen that my wife will go on a business trip for a week? She rarely goes on business trips, and then there's my daughter at the sea. Jenna, you wanted to see the Capitol. I'll give you a tour." Betty couldn't believe her ears. Is this really happening to her? Her husband is now cooing with some lady and even calling her over to their place while his wife is away on business. Mason has a mistress. Betty really wanted to explain the overheard conversation to herself in a different way, but her imagination was clearly lacking for a different version. And what else could she do to justify all this? Sunshine. "Come here. My wife's on a business trip." Mason almost cooed into the phone, speaking tenderly and affectionately. He hasn't spoken to his wife like that in a long time. Apparently, the unfamiliar Jenna had decided to come to New York after all. That's great. Mason was sincerely happy. "I'll meet you at the airport. I have such plans. We'll have a great time." Yeah, whatever you want." "Oh, you're so beautiful." "I'm looking forward to it, too." The conversation seemed to be coming to an end. Betty crept back to the door on shaky legs and slipped out onto the landing. She decided not to show Mason that she had heard him on the phone with someone named Jenna, a beauty by the looks of it. At least that's what he'd called her. Yes, Betty had no doubts about the superior looks of Mason's date. Her husband had always been an aesthete. The woman entered the apartment a second time. Now she purposely slammed the door loudly, signaling her presence. Mason stepped out into the hallway. Betty watched carefully as the confusion, Surprise and disappointment in his eyes was gradually replaced by a made joy. Her husband had always been excellent at self-control. Now he quickly pulled himself together. If Betty had not heard this conversation, she would not have noticed that her arrival was not a happy news for her husband. "You're back," he smiled broadly. Mason was good at hiding his frustration at the lurking plans. "What kind of actor?" "Rescheduled a business trip," Betty replied. Her heart was pounding furiously, and her head was starting to hurt. "Were you upset about it?" Mason asked. "You're just not wearing your face. I felt sick in the cab." Betty lied. "I want to lie down." She went to the bedroom and, without undressing, fell in their big bed, trying not to think about the fact that perhaps her husband was planning to invite his mistress here. How could this be? They had been through so much together, had traveled so long and hard to build their prosperous, happy family, and had overcome all the difficulties together, shoulder to shoulder, always supporting each other, so many small and big victories behind them. Periodically, Betty would learn that the husband of one of her colleagues or friends had a mistress. Outraged and certain that it would definitely never happen in her family. And now this conversation. Her head ached, growing increasingly nauseous. Mason, seeing his wife lying pale and in a state of flux, was alarmed and brought her painkillers and a cold compressed to her forehead. Had it not been for the overheard conversation, Betty would now be glad of such care. But then she wouldn't have been sick, either, because she'd been overexcited and her blood pressure had skyrocketed. Pressing her fingers to her temples so that the headache was easier to bear, Betty thought back to her and Mason's acquaintance. It had been a fun, carefree college time. The girl was relaxing in a club, in the company of classmates. There she had been noticed by him, a charming fellow with a wide, white-toothed smile, witty and cheerful, who could dance, unlike Betty herself. "What a handsome boy," Kelly remarked, a childhood friend. "Lucky you, don't miss out." And Betty? Yes, Mason was a prince, but right now she just wanted to have fun with her friends. She had no plans for romance, much less a serious relationship. Only recently Betty had hardly got rid of her ex-boyfriend, obsessive and constantly demanding attention. And now the girl was enjoying her freedom. The admiration in Mason's eyes was pleasing to Betty's ego. She liked his compliments and touches. He obviously hoped to continue communication outside the club, even took Betty's phone number. However, she had changed some numbers on purpose, as she often did. The girl did not plan a second meeting, so she tried to enjoy communication with a handsome guy here and now. And then their student company decided to go to another club, closer to the house where Betty lived. The girl said goodbye to her new acquaintance, who was upset by this news. Mason then gently took her narrow palm in his, kissed her hand gallantly, and said, "I'll call you back. I really liked you. You're so beautiful, so special. I won't let you go." Betty smiled. She felt like a real princess at that moment. The girl was always popular with the opposite sex. She had what is called a model appearance. Tall, slender, long-legged, her shiny brown hair falling below her shoulders, and emerald green eyes, regularly received admiring glances and compliments, and each time it was very gratifying. As she did now, Betty smiled sweetly at Mason, whom she thought she would never meet again. And she got into the overcrowded car of her classmates, where her friends were already waiting for her. The merry company drove through the night streets of her hometown for a long time. The students laughed, sang their favorite songs, made plans for the approaching summer, and Betty, to her surprise, couldn't stop thinking about Mason. It wasn't the first time she'd given a guy the wrong phone number, only now she regretted it for some reason. and she felt guilty about lying to her new acquaintance. The first person Betty saw when they pulled up to the club was Mason. It turned out he had taken a cab and followed their car and was now walking toward her smiling and open arms. The girl hurried toward the guy with joy and relief. How lucky was it that he had guessed to do this? She was afraid they would never meet again. With Mason, Betty had always been fun. He knew exactly how to cheer her up and make her laugh. Next to him, she felt safe from everything in the world and very loved. She realized that if she needed him, Mason would do everything possible and impossible for her. And it was very pleasant. And Mason had somehow gained authority among Betty's friends, which was very important to her. And this could not but make the girl proud of her for such a witty and communicative young man. He, like Betty, was a student, a third-year student, but he was studying at another university, an architectural and construction university, and was already working part-time for a friend of his father's. Betty, on the other hand, was fully immersed in her studies. Her parents offered her to enter the University of Economics to study accounting. The girl didn't mind. By the end of the 11th grade, she had no special preferences. An accountant, so an accountant. Vacancies will not be difficult to find later. Accountants are required everywhere. But Mason really loved everything about architecture and could talk about his work for hours. Betty loved to listen to his stories and look into the enthusiastic eyes of her favorite person. She had no doubt Mason would be a great success in life. In their 4th year, the couple decided to consummate their relationship. They were sure of their feelings for each other. "I've found my destiny. It's you," said Mason one day. "I want to be with you all the time, not date you a few times a week. I want to fall asleep and wake up next to you. So what if we're still students? I don't want to wait too long to get married." Betty was happy, smiling. She felt the same way. The prospect of becoming Mason's wife and always being by his side was breathtaking. But parents on both sides actively opposed the ideas of the young ones, motivated by quite logical facts. Both are still studying. On their feet did not become, there is nowhere to live. Where to hurry? Meet and get married later, when you've finished your studies and found a job. And then Betty thought of telling her parents that she was expecting a child. So her mom and dad and her future mother-in-law quickly organized a wedding. "That's a lie, of course," said Mason. "But what can you do if they need a good reason?" "It's their own fault," agreed Betty. "Well, what if it's true? What if we really have a baby?" Mason suggested, "I really want us to have a baby. I'm already working. We'll live in my grandmother's empty apartment. I'll finish university. I'll be made the head of the department at once. The chief has already promised me a place, so I'll feed us." "That's a great idea." Betty was happy. She suddenly realized that she really wanted a child from the man she loved. It would be the happiest and most beautiful baby in the world. But for some reason, the attempts of the young ones were not successful. The cherished pregnancy did not come. True, then this young married couple did not particularly care. And without that in life was a lot of interesting parties, friends, studies, traveling. When the newlyweds admitted to their parents that there was no child, they didn't even get angry. By that time, adults sincerely loved the second halves of their children and considered their decision to get married a correct and responsible step. They only laughed at the ingenuity of Betty and Mason and hoped that they would not delay their grandchildren. And then, finally, the diploma. Betty and her husband are now young professionals. Mason, as promised, was promoted to department head. Betty got a job as a bookkeeper at the mall. Now they were making their own money for a living. Not much, of course, yet, but their parents continued to help out as a matter of habit. So they had enough not only for food and utilities, but also for fun. How good you are. Kelly, Betty's friend, admired her. You've done so well in life. I don't believe in fairy tales about early marriages falling apart, but I've been dumped by a guy again, and all I get are assholes. Betty sincerely pitied the woman who had failed in her personal life and thanked fate for sending her such a faithful, loving, reliable man as Mason. Her friends and coworkers were constantly complaining about their boyfriends and husbands. During these conversations, Betty felt a little awkward. She couldn't keep the conversation going, for she had nothing to reproach Mason with. Time passed. The newlyweds gradually managed to establish a household. Mason and Betty were homeschooled children, cared for by their parents, so household chores were a challenge for both of them at first. It turned out that Betty's long hair quickly clogs the drain, dishes do not wash themselves, dust in the corners accumulates incredibly quickly, and regularly ordered food in the restaurant hurts the family budget. The newlyweds were in for many such surprises. It got to the point that Betty, going to prepare dinner, typed in a search engine phrase, "Where can I get red water for borscht?" The couple withstood the test of everyday life with dignity. Both quickly enough learned to cook and clean, and even made repairs independently in the apartment. Their marriage was waiting for another test of durability. They were married for 5 years, and the family still had no children. Even Kelly managed to give birth to a son. However, she raised her Ethan alone now. His father considered himself too young for such responsibility and disappeared in an unknown direction. But Betty was still almost envious of her friend, looking at her miracle, a tiny cute little baby boy, and desperately dreamed of her own baby. Mason, too, was eager to be a father. The hospitalizations began. Betty was diagnosed with serious reproductive problems. Medications, ultrasounds, tests, treatments. All this exhausts both mentally and physically, but for the sake of her dream, the girl did not give up. Mason was by her side and supported her spouse in everything. Probably, this is our punishment for lying to our parents then, as if we were expecting a child. Betty sighed sorrowfully, looking at another negative pregnancy test. Come on, we meant well, and we didn't do anything wrong. And don't get upset. Everything will work out. But it didn't. When all possible treatments had been tried, the doctor recommended echo. Betty and Mason were sure they would soon be parents. But 3 tries and no success. Betty lay on the bed and just stared at the ceiling. There was no more strength left to cry. She realized she was never going to be a mother. It was all useless, and she didn't want to torture her own body, to hope again and then be disappointed. And then Mason came up. "Shall we try again?" He said, "Only once. I read the forums. Some people only get it on the 8th, 9th try. We're on our 4th. Let's do it. 4th try, and that's it. If we fail again, we'll take a kid from the orphanage. Do you agree?" Betty jumped up on the bed. She once suggested her husband to look at orphan profiles, but he flatly refused. He wanted a child of his own blood. He didn't want to raise a stranger's son or daughter, but Betty didn't care. She dreamed of giving love and warmth to a tiny, defenseless human being, even if not born by her. This desire overshadowed all others, filled the woman's thoughts. Mason remained adamant. He argued about bad genetics, the difficulties of adaptation. He didn't want another man's child, and he had every right to. Betty accepted his opinion. So her husband offers to take the baby from the orphanage, but before that he asks for another chance at a native hair. Of course, this time Betty happily agreed to the echo. She was going to the procedure in a completely different mood. One way or another, soon her cherished dream will come true. She will become a mother. It is not known what played a major role, the new therapy or Betty's positive attitude. But it wasn't until this fourth time that everything worked out. Betty looked at the 2-strike test and cried with happiness. And soon Mason joined her. The pregnancy was difficult. Betty was often hospitalized. Mason completely took over the household and almost blew the dust off his wife. He honored her every request, anticipated her every wish, even asked her to quit her job. You don't need to go there now. Nerves unnecessary waste. Rest better, have a baby, grow up a little, and find you a new job. My salary is enough for everything, and next year I'll be promoted. Betty happily plunged into the life of a housewife. A beloved, loving husband, a cozy new apartment, and soon there will be a baby. What more do you need to be happy? Oh, Betty, you are a clever woman. You have organized your life so well. My friend Kelly, who often came to visit, said approvingly. Not like me, a single mother who is torn between work and my son. Ethan was already in 1st grade. Kelly did look tired, thin, anxious, always in a hurry. There's a reason I told you at the club. Don't let him get away. He's a great guy. Remember what I said? I do. Betty agreed. She'd texted Mason the wrong phone number that night, and if he hadn't followed them to the club, none of this would be happening now. It's scary to imagine. And then Molly was born. There was no limit to the happiness of the young parents and the newfound grandparents. Now their family became even stronger and happier. True, Betty, after a long treatment, difficult pregnancy, and childbirth, began to have problems with blood pressure. She often felt ill. Mason in these moments perfectly coped with the baby, bathed his daughter, fed her from a bottle, entertained the baby, even swaddled the newborn. And he was just as good at it as Betty. Molly grew up bright and active, but very sickly. She often caught colds and bronchitis in the garden, so Betty had to delay going to work. The maternity leave dragged on until her daughter was 5, and then Kelly invited her best friend to her firm. There was just a vacancy, so the women became colleagues. Life fell into place. Molly was already a 1st grader. Betty worked. Mason became the head of a large branch of his company, which was located in Boston. There were no money problems. Her husband provided for the family. Betty thought their relationship was perfect. Yes, there wasn't much romance anymore. Sometimes it was very lacking. But after all, they had been together for so many years, it was normal. The main thing was trust, reliability, mutual support. And now this conversation. Betty felt like she couldn't handle the pressure. It seemed to her that these health problems were in the past. Then after giving birth, Mason found the best doctors for her, the new mom got the right therapy, and she forgot about the headaches for years. But now such stress and they're back. By evening, Mason couldn't take it anymore and called his wife an ambulance. She was diagnosed with hypertension and taken to the hospital. She had to lie down for about a week. During that time, the woman pulled herself together. She has no right to beat herself up like that. She has a small daughter and a beloved husband. Yes, he made a mistake, but Betty doesn't know the situation. Maybe it's Jenna, the unknown Jenna, who has tricked him around. Betty is not going to give up just like that. She's been building her strong, happy family for a long time. She and Mason have done everything possible and impossible together. And now she's gonna give her husband to some skank? No way. That's the last thing we need. Molly needs a father. She needs a reliable, caring husband. Betty will fight for her family. This decision gave the woman strength and vigor. There was plenty of time at the hospital to get busy searching for the beautiful stranger. Betty only knew her name so far, but in the age of social media, that was enough. First of all, the woman set about monitoring her husband's accounts. Mason had a lot of friends and subscribers, colleagues, friends, partners, just acquaintances. Jenna among them was enough. Betty rejected ladies of age immediately. Then it was the turn of women who did not reach the aesthetic tastes of her husband. Mason always preferred beautiful, slender, well-groomed girls like Betty herself. The remaining Jenna beauties from her husband's pages were 3. These young women didn't look too suspicious, all of them showing off their own happy families on social media. Their profiles were littered with photos of their other halves. Who knows who they are, though? It's not a fact that Mason's mistress is single. How many cases when married ladies decide to have a little fun and make a friend on the side? And yet Betty's intuition told her that Jenna wasn't one of them. Suddenly, the search engine gave Betty several accounts with a note. Perhaps you two know each other. Among them was Liam, a colleague of Mason's from the Boston branch. In the main profile photo, he was clearly posing from a corporate event, with their company logo in the background. Betty was interested. Her husband had never shown her pictures from the parties he'd flown to Boston for. He said he wasn't interested in collecting that garbage, and he hated being photographed. And now Betty wanted to see how their corporate holidays were going. If Liam had put a photo from the party on the cover, he'd probably have a couple more on his profile. Betty went to the page of her husband's colleague, and as she expected, he had a whole album of photos from corporate parties. The woman started flipping through the photos with interest. She noticed her husband in some of them. He seemed to be deliberately hiding from the cameras, and the photographer managed to capture only a glimpse of him, in a half-turn or from the back. Betty smiled. Mason hadn't liked to be photographed since he was a child. His mother had told me a funny story about it, but it wasn't long before the woman wasn't laughing. The next photo featured the 3 of them, Liam, Mason, and a beautiful, bright young woman with chiseled facial features. Betty's husband stood in the center. The lady was clinging to him in an overly possessive way, and he was naturally and habitually putting his arm around her slim waist. Something wasn't right here. Betty shifted her eyes downward. Each of the characters in the photos were labeled Mason and Jenna. Jenna. Betty seemed to have accidentally stumbled upon the one she was looking for. The woman quickly navigated to the girl's page. There were many pictures of her. The beauty clearly loved being photographed. You bet, with such appearance, just a supermodel. Jenna at a resort. Jenna in a luxurious restaurant. Jenna in the pool, and everywhere alone. How could a hottie like Jenna be alone? She can't be. I bet she's got a lot of dates. And suddenly Betty saw a picture from the sea. It was obviously some foreign resort. White sand, bright sunshine, palm trees, turquoise waves. Jenna was photographing the beautiful landscape. In the frame, apparently, accidentally got a man. He stood with his back to the lens. But Betty recognized her husband, his figure, the birthmark on his neck, and the T-shirt that she herself gave him. There was no doubt. This was the same Jenna her husband had called to New York for her business trip. The same mistress. And they're serious. They're even traveling to the sea together. Mason must have explained those trips to her as business trips, of which he'd had too many lately. Well, at least now Betty knows the enemy. Jenna was in her final year of university when she met Mason. It happened in a bar where she and a classmate were celebrating the end of the session. A handsome young man in an expensive business suit was relaxing at a neighboring table with a few friends, or rather colleagues. Those two were dressed in strict jackets and pants. Businessmen, probably. Christina, Jenna's dorm roommate and classmate, looked at them. They're all so cool. Come on, they're old for us, and they're probably married. Just let me dream. So cool, well-groomed, not like our guys, continued to admire Christina. Having a couple of glasses of wine, she always became kinder to the opposite sex. Every man seemed to her almost a prince on a white horse. But the men in this nearby company did look attractive. Stylish, trim, handsome. One of them stood out in particular, gray-eyed, with a wide, white-toothed smile that made dimples appear on his cheeks. Jenna tried not to look in his direction. "Look, they're looking at us," Christina said admiringly. "Of course, you yourself do not take your eyes off them. So they look at you and are surprised. Calm down. Jenna, they are coming to us." Indeed, soon one of the men, not the one Jenna liked, came to their table. He introduced himself as Liam and asked Christina to dance with him. She gladly agreed. Jenna finished her cocktail and watched the dancing of her friend, who, apparently, decided to get closer to the beau by all means. But another man, the oldest of the group, with an expensive watch on his arm and stylish glasses, separated from the table. "Good evening." He introduced himself, taking a seat next to Jenna. "What is it that such a beautiful girl is sad here alone?" What a banal approach. From the representative of the older generation, Jenna expected something original. "I'm not sad about being alone. I'm enjoying it." The girl not too subtly hinted at being left alone, but the newfound admirer did not give up. "My name is James," he introduced himself. "I just can't resist your beauty. You look like a young Nicole Kidman. Has anyone ever told you that?" "More than once. Can I ask you your name?" "No, you don't have to say no so flatly. You just don't realize you're missing out on a great opportunity I could give you. Give me some peace for starters." Jenna was getting annoyed. That Christina, she is there on the dance floor with her handsome man, and she has to fight off an obsessive suitor who does not understand neither hints nor direct refusals. James, meanwhile, had moved closer to Jenna, and he was drunk. That partly explained his lack of judgment. Surely in ordinary life, this man is tactful and intelligent. Some people shouldn't drink at all. They turn into such animals. James put his hand on the back of Jenna's chair and looked at the girl with admiring eyes. It was unpleasant. She stood up, intending to leave, but the man held her hand, his palm firmly around her wrist. "Where are you going? We haven't even met yet." "I have to go. I'll walk you out." James jumped up from his seat. He never let go of my hand. "Let me go already." Jenna shouted loudly. He didn't think to loosen his grip. Perhaps he couldn't hear or understand what he was saying, the cocktails playing no small part in his behavior. James, instead of letting go of Jenna, suddenly hugged her. It was too much. The girl moved as hard as she could at the insolent man, her elbow right into his soft belly, and he awed and opened his arms for a moment. The man's eyes flashed with malice. It frightened the girl. Anything could be expected from a drunken stranger. She tried to slip away, but he grabbed her again. This time roughly and very tightly. Jenna felt pain. "We need to talk. Sit down," James asked. "James, what are you doing?" "Calm down." The gray-eyed man approached them. Fortunately, he noticed what was going on at the table and rushed to help, either to rescue his friend from possible trouble or to protect the girl. For some reason, Jenna immediately felt safe and realized that everything was going to work out. Why would she? James' speech became more and more incoherent. Two other men from the company came up to them and took the clueless comrade to their table. "You excuse him." The gray-eyed one smiled. "I had a little too much to drink, and today the deal was closed, so here's a note." "Thank you," replied Jenna. She couldn't take her eyes off the man's beautiful, intelligent eyes. The girl just drowned in them. He looked even more attractive up close than he looked from afar. For some reason, she wanted to run her hand over his cheeks, touched with light stubble. That had never happened to her before. Jenna painfully invented an excuse to prolong communication with the gray-eyed man. She did not want to part with him. Fate had taken pity on her, and everything had worked itself out. And Mason, Liam, and Christina, who had been dancing, came to the table. "Come on, land here. Look how cool the girls are." Christina laughed foolishly with adoration, looking at her beau. Mason stayed at the table, and Jenna realized it was because of her. A hot wave ran through her whole body. She was drawn to Mason more and more, like a magnet pulling her. Mason was a very interesting and witty conversationalist. He seemed to be able to hold a conversation on any topic, and Jenna wanted to agree with his opinions every time. She wished the evening would never end. It was unlikely that she would ever meet this man who had such a strange influence on her again. From the table conversations, the girl realized that he lives and works in Boston and came here on a business trip. Mason, to Jenna's disappointment, did not even try to get her phone number. Most likely he is married, and he does not need a relationship on the side. Yes, the girl felt that she liked Mason, and it was very pleasant, but he behaved as restrained as possible, not showing his sympathy in any way. Jenna hoped that she did not give away her sudden feelings either. Until now, she hadn't understood what passion, love, and other concepts from romantic books and movies meant. It seemed to her that all of these were fictitious categories, that they didn't really exist, but now she was in a whirlpool of feelings, and she had no idea what to do with it all. The evening was rapidly drawing to a close. The bar closes at 200 hours. Christina and Liam decided to take a cab and go for a walk. They called Masana and Jenna, but the man refused at once, saying that he had an important meeting in the afternoon. Jenna thought of some reason not to go with the couple. When Christina and Liam drove off into the night, Mason offered to walk Jenna home. Her heart raced. Was what had been dreamed of all evening really happening? She'd really hit it off, and they'd start a relationship. Without witnesses, he would finally dare to take a step towards her. His heart fluttered in joyful anticipation. In the cab, the girl waited for Mason to kiss her, or at least to embrace her, but he again behaved a little aloofly, though he joked and smiled a lot. And already on the porch of the student dormitory, he took Jenna's phone number. She gladly dictated the numbers to him and realized that from that moment, she would live in anticipation of a call. It didn't take long to wait. Mason called the very next day, invited to the movie. After the movie, they walked along the waterfront, then stopped by a luxurious restaurant. Jenna had been living in Boston for 5 years, but she had no idea that there were such places here. She felt a little uncomfortable, but Mason helped her relax, just covered her hand with his palm, and all the anxiety, worry, awkwardness disappeared as if it had never happened. Then he offered to go to his place. Of course, Jenna knew what that meant, and Mason realized that she knew what she was getting into, so he didn't insist, gave her the right to choose. Jenna agreed without the slightest hesitation. The corporate apartment was as upscale and presentable as Mason himself, stylish, bright, spacious, modern, and clearly designed by a designer. Jenna didn't realize whether the company had bought the apartment for Mason or whether it was just renting it to an employee, because the latter was often in Boston. That's how they started dating. That first night, the couple was cozy on the couch in the living room. Mason suggested Jenna not to go to the hostel at night, but to stay with him. The girl gladly accepted the invitation. She did not want to part with Mason. And here they were watching some show on TV and eating rolls ordered from the restaurant, drinking insanely delicious champagne. Finally, the girl decided on an important question, which did not give her a rest. "And you, were you married?" she asked. "Yes. Does it matter?" Jenna thought for a moment. On the one hand, it really didn't matter. She feels happy around Mason. She wants to see the face and smell the smell of the man she loves, to feel his touch and bathe in his admiration and care, and to be a part of his beautiful life. Yes, Jenna wasn't lying to herself. She liked that Mason was so successful and wealthy, but that wasn't the only thing that attracted her to him. Far from it. And the wife, she was somewhere far away, New York. What did it matter if she even existed or not? On the other hand, Jenna realized that it is not good to have an affair with a married man. It is always a betrayal, and the outcome is often sad, even tragic sometimes. The girl herself many times lectured her friend Christina when she was too fond of unfree men. And yet, still Mason attracted Jenna, charmed, mesmerized. For the sake of being near him, she was ready to go over all her principles and moral turmoil. After all, Jenna is not going to take him out of the family, at least not until she is enough to feel, at least sometimes as a woman, this strong, confident, and intelligent man. Mason has shown Jenna a very different life. The girl came to Boston to study from the village, and it took a long time to get used to the city. There was a time when she was even shy to go with her classmates to cheap cafes and eateries. In her village, she did not see anything like that. Such places seemed to her too luxurious. She felt in them some lost and ridiculous. Gradually, Jenna settled in Boston. It was easier and more fun to adapt with her roommate, Christina, a country girl like her. Looking at other students and following their advice, Jenna learned to dress and make up so as to favorably emphasize the advantages of her appearance. And movie halls, cafes, and bars soon stopped scaring her. Boys, students, and even teachers began to pay attention to Jenna. The girl realized the power of her beauty, but was not in a hurry to use it to the fullest, not like Christina, who seemed to try to take from her freshness and youth all at once. Jenna, however, having seen different stories in her village, and in the city too, had made up her mind. First she would study, get on her feet, and then she would organize her personal life, surely with a worthy and successful man. They will have a wonderful family, a perfect one. Jenna will never again live in the poverty of her childhood, and she will not return to her village. On the contrary, she will bring her mother and brother here. The girl had global plans, and she confidently went to the goal. She studied at her pedagogical university, but she did not plan to work as a teacher of biology and geography. She thought that after graduation, she would find something more prestigious and highly paid. Entering this department right after school, the girl did not think much about the prospects. She went to the place where she had enough points, and the competition was small. And now Mason appeared in her life, and with him, trips to restaurants, luxurious gifts, long conversations on interesting topics, vivid impressions, new acquaintances. Not even 2 months after the beginning of their relationship, as Mason offered Jenna to fly with him for a few days to Thailand. The girl with pleasure plunged into this beautiful sea fairy tale. Later such trips became quite frequent. Mason could easily explain his absence to the family by business trips and business trips. Jenna, on the other hand, tried not to think about the fact that her man had another life, a wife and a daughter in New York. Of course, she almost immediately looked through her lover's social networks and saw pictures of his wife. Beautiful, successful woman, quite harmoniously looked in a pair with imposing Mason. Together they looked just perfect. Jenna could not help but recognize this fact, although it hurt her. The girl didn't plan to fall in love with Mason, or anyone at all. She had other goals for now, but she couldn't help it. Even yesterday, Jana was an ordinary student who often had to eat instant noodles for dinner, even with Christina sometimes sharing this treat. She counted a small scholarship and saved on everything, and today she knew by sight the staff of the most elite establishments in Boston. She herself now lived in the very Mason corporate apartment that had so delighted her in a stylish studio, packed to the brim with tricked-out appliances, with a spacious bathtub. Jenna liked to lie in it with a flute of cold champagne, like the girls in the movies about the beautiful life. Mason flew to Boston every month, sometimes more than once. It was required by work issues, but Jenna suspected that his business trips became so frequent because of her too. The girl realized that Mason really took her very seriously, not as just another mistress. And he wasn't the type to change women like a glove. Jenna knew that this was Mason's first and only relationship on the side, and she could see that the man was very uncomfortable with the fact that he had to lie to his wife, but he couldn't give up on Jenna. When the girl graduated from the university, Mason got her a job in his branch in the Human Resources Department. Jenna had to learn a lot practically from scratch to master a new specialty, but she coped, and she liked the work very much. And the salary, almost every month coming with a solid bonus, and quite happy. The girl realized that without experience, right from the university bench, she would never have found a place with such a salary if not for Mason, and she was grateful to him for the opportunity to get on her feet. It was very important to her. Time passed in the company. Some of the employees, of course, began to speculate about the relationship between the branch manager and Jenna. They talked and got used to it. The girl cared little about it, but she realized that sooner or later some well-wisher would report everything to Mason's wife. And what would happen then? It was difficult to suppose, yet years passed, but everything remained the same. Perhaps the 1,000 miles separating New York and Betty was released from the hospital. She was now completely well, both physically and mentally. She realized that she would fight for the man she loved and for her family. This decision gave her strength and confidence, but Betty needed allies, no one but her faithful friend Kelly to tell her the details of the story. "What a mess," Kelly said thoughtfully after listening to Betty. The women were sitting in a coffee shop, not far from the office. It was the only place to get away from the ears of their co-workers. "Yes, these are pies. I never would have thought that about Mason, the perfect husband and father from the outside. The weird thing is, he's a really great husband and father. They've been together for 4 years, and I had no idea. With his schedule, it's no wonder, constantly on the road, it's easy to hide not just a mistress, but a second family. Well, what have you decided? How will you proceed?" "Fight for my husband," Betty replied confidently. "I want Mason to realize that I am worth more to him than he is, and that no young beauty is worth losing his family. I'd like to do it without Mason realizing that I know about his relationship." "So you don't have a specific plan?" Kelly clarified. "What kind of plan? I don't have a lot of information. I only know her name and that she works at the Boston branch, which is probably where Mason put her. But I've seen pictures of her, and she's very pretty. So we need more information." Kelly concluded. Betty really liked it, us. She realized she now had a solid support in the person of her best friend. "We do." Betty agreed, but where would she get that information? "I don't know any of Mason's colleagues in Boston. I can't even ask them. I have an idea." Kelly suddenly had an idea. "Really, what is it?" "Wait, I don't want to get your hopes up yet. I'll call you tonight. and her friend kept her promise. Indeed, called in the evening and outlined her simple, like all things brilliant plan. Kelly's brother had a friend who was an IT specialist. He helped Betty install a program that she could now use to control her husband's social networking and messenger accounts. If you don't know me, I don't know you. Half jokingly, half seriously, the young man warned. Betty could now see all of her husband's correspondence with family and friends, co-workers, partners, but most importantly with her, with the young blue-eyed Jenna who had intruded into their family. Of course, the woman felt some remorse because she had so treacherously invaded the personal space of the man she loved. But on the other hand, he had done far worse to her. Betty quickly realizes that things between Jenna and Mason are quite serious. She lives in his corporate apartment, cooking him delicious dinners there when Mason flies to Boston on business. Apparently, she tries very hard, specifically looking for exquisite recipes, not like Betty herself. Work and a child take so much energy and time, so she has recently had enough only for pasta and sausages, and the apartment is often not cleaned. However, Mason has never once expressed dissatisfaction with the domestic moments. On the contrary, when time allowed him, he took care of household chores without any indulgence, but maybe he still lacked care and attention, Betty. With the arrival of the long-awaited child, the woman did indeed spend much less time with her husband. Perhaps what happened was her fault. No, that's the wrong way to think about it. It's not easy for her either. But it's not like she went looking for a comforting lover. Mason and Jenna occasionally flew together for vacations. Betty realized this from the correspondence, in which there were phrases like "when we were in Italy" or "resorts by the warm sea, we've been many times before. I want to try something new. Maybe the Scandinavian countries? Sounds like they've traveled halfway around the world. That was a shame." Betty was sympathetic to her husband's busy schedule. Yes, they didn't spend much time together, but the woman believed that her husband was working for the good of their family. And now it turned out that many of these business trips were just a cover for traveling with Jenna. Reading the correspondence, Betty realized a lot. This girl is really in love with Mason, and him, Jenna gives him what her husband cannot get in the family: passion, free time, vivid emotions, blind adoration. But if he was really ready to leave his wife for her, he would have done it already. Mason is clearly serious about Jenna, but apparently doesn't really love her. Except things can change. For example, the young mistress will give him a child, and then Mason will never leave them. Or anything else for that matter. Slowly Jenna can bind her man to herself, make him fall in love with himself. So she had to act decisively and as quickly as possible, but she couldn't come up with a plan. And Kelly couldn't offer any advice. "I'm a single mom. What kind of counselor am I?" she said, confused. "Just know that if you need my help, I'm always here for you." "Thank you. You've been so helpful. At least now I know the ins and outs of their relationship." "What's it like? How does it feel to know your husband's not going on a business trip?" But to her, it hurts, Betty admitted, but it's still better than being in the dark. Jenna had been thinking about starting her own business for a long time. She decided to try to open several dispensing centers of a popular online store. The girl thoroughly studied all the necessary information and made a business plan, but the accumulated funds were clearly not enough to start. Jenna was sure that Mason would gladly help her. He always supported all her endeavors and encouraged her development in any sphere. This time, too, Mason was pleased with the idea of a mistress. "That's a wonderful idea." He praised it. "And the direction is promising. With paperwork, if anything, I'll help. Only I do not have enough money." And Jenna voiced the missing amount, quite decent, but not astronomical for Mason. "I can't take out so much at once. I'll fly to New York. You remind me, I'll transfer it." As it was agreed, Jenna sent Mason a text message with a reminder about the money transfer. Her lover never refused her anything. The girl was used to it, so she had no doubt that now she would get what she wanted. But the message about crediting the funds did not come, and time was running out. It was necessary to pay rent, advertising, utilities, and purchase racks for storage. So Jenna texted Mason again, to which she received a reply that he was looking into the matter. Eventually, Mason called and informed her in a frustrated voice that it wasn't going to work out. His family urgently needed money for something. Jenna did not get into the details. The man promised that he would definitely help her next month. The girl leaned back in her chair. Now she clearly felt second best. The family needed money, and Mason had chosen his wife in this situation, easily and without the slightest doubt. Next to him, Jenna was used to feeling superior to everyone else. Perhaps she was even in love with this self-perception, but now the girl fully saw the disadvantages of her status. She is only a mistress. Not even entitled to take offense, Mason does so much for her as it is. Betty, of course, read a text message from Jenna in which the mistress reminded Mason that he promised to give her money for business development. That message both pleased and angered the woman. At the same time pleased by the fact that the girl apparently takes good advantage of her husband's opportunities. Mason cannot ignore this. He is far from being a fool. The easier it will be to convince him of the mercantile interest of the mistress, which against the background of sincere love and affection of his wife, will look especially ugly. And Betty was outraged that Jenna is too bossy with her husband's resources, and he, apparently, easily follows her lead. "No way, Jenna. You're out of the family budget." That evening, Mason was late for work, and Betty had time to prepare a delicious dinner. Sitting at the table, her husband marveled at her culinary skills and praised the dishes. "Better than a restaurant," husband confessed. "I'm glad you like it," smiled Betty. "How was your day?" "The usual." "It was fine." "I've just had my Infinity breakdown," Betty confessed. "Infinity?" Mason was surprised. "I just bought you a car a while ago. It's a good, reliable car. I'll send the mechanics over tomorrow." "No need. I already took it to the service myself. It needs repair. Expensive." "How much?" And then Betty said an amount only a little less than what the mistress had asked. Mason stopped talking, thinking. Betty realized he was considering whether he could help both his wife and Jenna at the same time, and deciding who to sponsor first. A lot depended on his choice now, and his wife helped him make it. "I need a car urgently. Molly has a competition soon, training every day. I can't miss it, and I have to travel a lot for work every day. You know we have locations all over the city." Mason immediately transferred the necessary amount of money to Betty at the table. And then a little later the woman read a message from her husband, in which he justified himself to Jenna. The mistress never received the promised funds. What pleased Betty most was the fact that Mason had chosen her over Jenna. After all, the mistress also had a good enough reason. She wanted to start her own business, and yet her husband had helped his wife. Jenna must have noticed that, and now she's suffering. Serves her right. Let her know her place. The money situation upset Jenna and even disappointed her, but she pulled herself together and life went on as usual. The following month Mason did find the missing funds for her, and the girl started her business. She had a wise assistant and mentor in the person of her favorite man, so the experience was successful. Soon the invested money began to bring a good income. True, Jenna had more worries, but she even liked such business. She had no time and energy to think about her unenviable position as a mistress. She simply enjoyed Mason's presence in her life, his attention, his support, his patronage. She was still fascinated by his gray eyes, and she still melted at his touch as surely as she had on the first day of their acquaintance. Christmas was approaching, her favorite holiday since childhood. Jenna loved the scent of pine needles. She was mesmerized by the colorful lights, garlands. She was no longer a little girl, but as before, she associated the end of December with the expectation of a miracle, and this time the miracle really happened. Mason sent a text message asking her to buy a beautiful new swimsuit instead of an evening gown for the corporate party. He suggested we fly together to the Arab Emirates on New Year's Eve weekend. Getting away for a few days from the hustle and bustle that always accompanies the end of the year sounded delightful. Of course, Jenna replied that she gladly accepted the offer and went to the mall that same day. She wanted to look flawless for Mason on this vacation. Jenna liked to see his rapturous gaze, to hear the compliments she received. So she picked up a beach closet, maximally emphasizing the numerous advantages of her appearance. The girl was sure that not only Mason will admire her on the beach. Let her lover see what success his girl enjoys with others. Jenna had read somewhere that it greatly increases the value of the chosen one in the eyes of men. The girl was already anticipating how they would splash in the warm waters of the Persian Gulf and rock out at the local discos, and then rest in the luxurious apartments of the hotel. The trip promised to be wonderful. Jenna tried to behave with restraint, but in the end she could not resist the handsome student from England. He was 3 years younger than her and seemed to have a real crush on the American girl. Although Jenna immediately told him that their romance was purely resort for only a few days. The young man made her feel needed and admirable again, but Jenna realized that neither he nor anyone else could replace Mason. The pre-holiday weekend flew by like a blink of an eye. It was time to go home. Jenna realized that she missed Mason very much and was ready to forgive him anything. Although, of course, as they say, the resentment was gone, but the residue remained. Betty felt like a winner again. They just had a wonderful couple of days at the base, skiing and tubing, walking through the winter forest, roasting meat, drinking spicy mulled wine, playing board games in a big and friendly group. We laughed a lot and talked about interesting topics. Betty listened to a lot of thanks for the fact that she had guessed to bring everyone together and organize this trip. Most importantly, they were together at this time, Betty, Mason, Molly. There was no rushing or hurrying anywhere. Fully enjoying each other's company and hugging and laughing all the time. Betty decided that they needed to do this kind of outing more often. All of this was clearly good for their relationship. At first, Mason seemed anxious and lost. Apparently, he couldn't stop thinking about the lonely Jenna, but then he relaxed, calmed down, and began to enjoy the winter vacation. And the mistress flew to Dubai with a friend. That was wonderful. Betty sincerely hoped that she would meet some rich man there and not return to the USA. Why? Jenna is a blue-eyed blonde, a real beauty, so this option is quite possible. But as much as Betty didn't want it, the problem didn't solve itself. Jenna came back and immediately started texting Mason about how much she missed him. That was okay. Betty wasn't going to give up. Jenna had a favorite little brother. She'd raised him since he was a baby, helping his busy, tired mother. Now David was all grown up, 18 years old. Time has flown by quickly. From a cute, blonde-haired little kid, he turned into a handsome young man. He entered a sports college and was given a dormitory. Charles began his student life, of course. He often came to his sister. She was always happy to invite her relative and even helped him with money. but the young man wanted to earn money himself. "I'm looking for a job," one day he confessed to Jenna. "They promised to take me as a courier in the delivery service. You'll be in the snow and in the cold to travel around the city with a huge box on your shoulders." My sister shook her head. "And get change for it. You don't even have a car, so you should at least drive it. Otherwise, you'll be walking and taking buses." "But what can I do?" "For now, we'll see. Everyone works somehow." "Everyone?" Jenna frowned. "It's different for everyone." And the older sister reminded her brother of a story that had recently happened in their town. A courier, a young girl, brought an order to an apartment and fell into the clutches of drunken guys. The girl miraculously survived the encounter with the scumbags. But it was a girl. I'm a man. David brushed it off. "What's the comparison? You think because you're a guy, you're safe?" "Well, sort of." David smiled. "Come on, you're getting a little shady around town. It used to be quieter." "All right, I'll talk to someone. Maybe I can get you a job driving for our firm. There's probably plenty of applicants. Your salaries are good." "Yes, there are a lot of applicants," agreed Jenna. "But not every one of them has a sister working in the personnel department." Of course, the girl immediately wrote to Mason. In their branch, there was indeed a vacancy for a driver to unload materials. As a member of the Human Resources Department, Jenna could not help but know about it. The work is not much, the pay is good. David would be able to combine study and work perfectly and would not need money. Mason replied that he would take care of the matter. Jenna was sure that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow she would register her brother for a vacant position. Betty read the post about the vacancy and wondered. Another request that could be used in the struggle for marital happiness. The mistress would again be left with nothing. The woman suddenly remembered that she had a nephew living in Boston, so she dialed the number of a great aunt, his mother. It turned out that the nephew works at a local factory, works hard, and gets change. The situation was perfect. Betty happily told her aunt about the job opening and promised to talk to her husband. "How did you know the Boston branch needed a driver?" Mason looked at his wife in surprise. She had just asked him to hire her great-nephew for the job, describing beforehand how important the relationship with those relatives was to her and how she wanted to help them. "I happened to run into Kathy, your boss's wife, at the mall." Mason wondered how bad the timing of all this was. After all, he'd promised a spot to Jenna's brother. "She's gonna be upset again, but we already found someone." "Mason, I called Human Resources. The position is still vacant. Say no to that person. Say it's taken." "Do you have any idea what my aunt did for me?" "I just have to pay her back. A good job for her son is what's needed." "Oh, please, for my sake." Mason heartily texted Jenna to tell her that he couldn't take her brother's job. Of course, the girl was upset. Resentment squeezed her heart. She even threw a plate on the floor in a fit of anger. Again, she was sidetracked. And the next day, the new driver added fuel to the fire. A radiant young man came to apply for a job. He happily shared that he had been told about the position by his great-aunt from New York, the wife of the Boston branch manager Mason. So once again Betty, without realizing it herself, had screwed things up. Jenna felt herself slowly beginning to hate the woman. She was the reason Mason repeatedly rejected her requests, and he was becoming more and more frustrating. It seemed that Mason was gradually burning out. Their protracted relationship was becoming more and more like a habit. Jenna was very sad to realize it, because the girl still wanted to be near him, to hear his voice, to see attentive gray eyes, and yet the girl realized more and more clearly that their romance would lead to nothing. She had realized it from the beginning, But then passion overshadowed all rational thoughts. Jenna felt herself next to Mason exceptional and unique. He seemed willing to do anything for her. Mason really did a lot for Jenna, but lately his attention was clearly not enough for her. He was always dealing with family problems, working a lot. It was so humiliating to be on the sidelines, especially with so many available men around who would be happy to be near her. "Come visit me this weekend. I miss you so much," asked Jenna. Mason hadn't been in Boston in over a month. "Baby, I can't. There's a lot of work at the head office. Maybe it's the wife again." Mason sighed. He must have loved Jenna in his own way. He sure did. Why else couldn't he break off a relationship that had grown too serious? He liked a lot of things about her. Good looks, determination, wisdom. Despite her youth, Jenna was remarkably adequate. She never threw tantrums, never drove him crazy. Mason was sure that she would not get pregnant in order to marry him, and would not call Betty with offers to leave her husband. But lately, Jenna has been a little too jealous of his wife. Yes, indeed, there have been several incidents in which Mason has shown that family is more important to him than anything else, but he's never hidden that from Jenna. He admitted on their first date that he wasn't single, and several times during their time together, the man was ready to let her go when she wanted to leave. But Jenna had always come back, and Mason had been genuinely happy about it. He'd probably gotten used to having her around by now. Beautiful, in love, not too demanding, understanding. It was a shame that her behavior was changing. But maybe it's just some crisis in the relationship. It's necessary to be patient a little, and everything will be back to normal. Jenna sat with a glass of champagne, in a bubble bath. Being a village girl from a poor family, she never dreamed of such a life. A high-paying job, luxurious interiors, her own small business, a beautiful car, and a man she loved. True, things were not so smooth with the man. He belonged to another, and lately it was indicated more and more often and more vividly. Just at one moment, everything went wrong, as if someone upstairs decided that Jenna had enough personal happiness. Mason's not coming again, citing work, but it's probably all about family. I wondered if she needed help. Would he give up his wife, his kid, his office to support her? I'd have to see if he'd lie. But it's a test, and the future of their relationship depends on how Mason reacts. If he drops everything and flies to her, they'll be together. No. Jenna will pack her things and go to her mother's village for a few months, quit her job. Mason will be there. The business will be entrusted to Christina for the time being. She's her right-hand woman now, her friend's in the loop. She'll be fine without her. And Jenna will get over her illness, cry and go back to being free. But that's plan B. The girl still hoped Mason would rush to her like he used to. Maybe in time he would even leave his wife, and they would build a family of their own. The phone clicked with a special beep, meaning Mason had a message from Jenna. Betty quickly read it. Okay, that makes sense. New request. The mistress is complaining to her husband about feeling awful vascular problems and wild headaches. I can't do anything. Probably have to go to the hospital. I need help with my business and personal support from my loved one. Betty thought about it. Her intuition told her it was a lie. Jenna is a young girl in the prime of life. The woman had seen the recent pictures she had sent her husband on a regular basis. In them, Jenna was strikingly fresh. Clean, radiant skin, light blush, bright eyes. Looking at the pictures, Betty thought that youth was still beautiful in itself. The girl clearly didn't look sick. Of course, all sorts of things happen. Her hypertensive crisis came on suddenly. But even if Jenna was really sick, let her heal herself. She was not a little girl. Mason took her to a high-paying position, helped her to establish a business, so the money for treatment at Madame clearly has, and care and attention let and demand from close relatives. No, Betty will not let her husband go to Boston anytime soon. Except that she has to come up with a reason, but she'll manage. Lately, Betty felt like she was just a generator of ideas. It didn't take long to think of one. When Betty was picking up her daughter from figure skating practice, she noticed a colorful poster on the wall of the sports center. A grand performance of the section's pupils at the big stadium was planned. The show promised to be bright and colorful. Betty approached Coach Molly. "Hello, why isn't my daughter in the show?" "Molly's not ready yet. She has great prospects. Next year she will definitely show herself, but right now. Perhaps she needs extra lessons? I'm ready to pay for them, as long as my daughter gets to this concert. You see, we have elderly relatives visiting us. This may be the last time they come to New York. If they could see Molly, it would make them happy." "I understand, but does your section need new equipment? If you put Molly on the program, I'll get it for you." "All right." With apparent reluctance, the coach agreed. "Only Molly will have a cameo. She is still small, and it doesn't matter." Betty shined. "The main thing is that Molly will perform." At dinner, Mason said that the day after tomorrow, he would be flying to Boston to solve some work issues. Couldn't the business trip be rescheduled? Betty pretended to be surprised and upset by the news. "Why? Something urgent again?" "I wanted to tell you such happy news. Our Molly has been accepted to perform at the Ice Palace. She's the smallest person in the show. Can you believe it?" Mason looked proudly at his daughter sitting next to him. "You're doing great. You're the star of the ice." "Yes." Molly lowered her eyes modestly. "I'm good. I've worked so hard, and now I'm going to perform. You're coming to watch, right, Daddy?" Mason looked into his daughter's hopeful eyes. The man's choice was obvious. Jenna would soon receive another rejection. Another Betty-directed situation that should contribute to the destruction of the relationship, mistress and husband. Jenna was packing her things. She did not want to leave her apartment, which for 4 years had become almost native, but the girl was determined. This time she is definitely leaving Mason. He has shown her time and time again that family is more important to him. Jenna will always be in second place for him, even perhaps in third place. Then there's the job she adores. She's already bought the train tickets at the office. She herself has drawn up an order for her dismissal. The story's over. Jenna realized that she wanted to be the only one for her man. Perhaps it was time to start a family of her own. Christina recently got married and is now expecting a son. Looking at the family happiness, friends, Jenna realized that she dreams of the same, but a husband and a child. All of this is unthinkable while she's in a relationship with Mason. It was time to put a stop to it. Jenna no longer resented Mason, only the pain of knowing he loved another woman. The man had done so much for her. The girl felt grateful to him, and she would be sure to tell him that to his face or over the phone. But later, not now. Now it is necessary to wait it out, to get over it, to hide for a while. And then a new life would begin. Mason watched Molly's performance. He had come to the Ice Palace with a tricked-out professional camera. Betty watched as he tried to catch his daughter in the frame, not often succeeding. Just as the coach had warned, Molly flashed in the back rows, but the proud father didn't seem to notice. His eyes burned with genuine admiration for his child. Next to him lay a bouquet of roses prepared for the little star. Then the phone beeped again, the same beep that had alerted him to messages from Jenna. Mason didn't pay attention to the sound. He was completely absorbed in his daughter's performance, and Betty, of course, immediately read the text message and smiled victoriously. Jenna asked him not to look for her. She said it was over between them. She even quit her job at the Mason branch so she wouldn't have to see him. Sounds like a win to me. Although, of course, it's too soon to relax. Mason, back in his empty Boston apartment, felt an acute sense of guilt. Taken 4 years of Jenna's life. She could have met her destiny, gotten married, had children instead of wasting her youth on a futile relationship. His conscience was soothed only by the fact that he still helped this girl to establish a business and become financially independent. But the sadness and regret that he and Jenna were not together now, strangely enough, was not there. On the contrary, the man even felt relieved. Now he wouldn't have to flit between his wife and his mistress, trying to pay attention to both. There would no longer be that oppressive feeling of guilt in front of Jenna and Betty. The situation had resolved itself. Lucky. Betty was celebrating the victory with her best friend Kelly. The women were sitting at a pizza place near their office. It was lunch hour. Good for you. Kelly praised the woman. She overcame her resentment, was able to forgive the man she loved, and kept her family together. She pulled it off so masterfully, and it's like she had nothing to do with it. Yes, I'm a strategist, it turns out. Betty agreed. Mason, I think, has come to value family even more. At least he's trying to make time for us. But, Mason's already had an affair. I don't want to scare you, but it's almost certain to happen again if he's capable of it. What are you gonna do then? Well, Betty set her glass down on the table. A cold determination appeared in her gaze. Well, in that case, I already know exactly what to do.